register and participate once the meeting has already started? Are they able to do that?
They are, yes.
Okay, so then I will include that when I read the agenda wording.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're ready? Cecil?
We are ready, yes.
Okay, so I call the special meeting of the City of Campbell to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Waterman,
Here.
Councilmember Bybee,
Present.
Councilmember Resnikoff,
Here.
Vice Mayor Gibbons,
Here.
Mayor Landry.
Present. All right, so our next item on the agenda is public comment. My understanding is we have 2 oral requests. Could the city clerk please comment?
Sure. Mayor Landry, I'm going to read the agenda information first. This special city council meeting will be conducted via telecommunication and is compliant with provisions of the Brown Act and Executive Order N2920 issued by the governor. Members of the public will not be able to attend meetings at the Campbell City Council chambers physically. The city council meeting is being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel. Members of the public wishing to participate can also register via Zoom, and the link for that is available on the agenda on our website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Cecil, do we have Susan available for her oral request?
Let me double check. I don't see her in the meeting quite yet.
Okay, what do we do? Do we come back if she signs in, or do it at the end? Or just move forward?
I could keep an eye on, if she comes in the meeting, I'll make you aware of it. But I would recommend moving forward.
Okay, well, if she does come in, I don't want to interrupt a topic that we're talking about. There is a point where we're going to take a break in the item 1. So if she does sign in, then maybe that would be the point to hear her. Okay.
Copy that. Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to public hearing and introduction of ordinances. We have received some desk items. Because they are available as part of the agenda package, we will not be reading all the desk items today. If someone does log in and want to make a public comment, the web address is on the first page of the agenda. So item number 1 is the introduction of fiscal year 2021 operating and capital budget. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Brian.
And Madam Mayor, just as a point of clarification, was there interest in taking those items out of order today?
Rich is showing their hand and a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
That's what I
Rick.
was talking to you a few minutes ago, and
Well,
I'm okay. I'm sorry. I don't have a strong opinion. We could do it towards the end. I mean, what we were talking about, you and I, Mayor, was, and I've talked to Brian, of course, about it, is just sort of perhaps allocating time on this agenda for when we're going to talk about the downtown, et cetera, issue, when we're going to talk about the budget, and then, allocating some time, hopefully in the end, so we can, as a council, talk about the budget from a high level, I was talking about as more of a service level discussion, rather than going department, we take a step back and talk about it more in that frame. If we're going to do that, then we sort of allocate time accordingly to each of them.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with moving item number 2 forward, but I want to make it clear that this item is not to discuss whether we close the downtown street in Campbell. A lot of people have sent that in as that is not part of the agenda topic. So if we do, how many, raise your hand if you want to do unfinished business first.
I'm okay either way.
I don't see Ann here. We got people out of order. So
There's
we
Ann.
all have hands up. Okay, so.
Mayor, if I may.
Yeah,
I'm in favor. I just want to be, recognize that let's
let's, like you said, consolidate it down to the issue at hand because we have to get to the budget. So as long as it doesn't drag and cost us budget time, let's do it.
Okay, Liz?
My only comment is the community at large, if they wanted to speak on this item, may not know that it's starting now and may expect it to start in a couple of hours. So we may lose community input. I'm just saying that's a possibility.
Okay. Well, we're not reading the desk items. And how would you know what time to log in later? I mean, if we do it now, how would you know if it's whether at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock?
Sorry, I'm not being clear. People expect it to be after the budget discussion. So I'm just saying that they would expect it wouldn't be happening right this minute at the beginning of the meeting. They would expect it to happen later in the meeting. It's fine. You can do whatever you want. I'm just commenting. We may end up with some people who expected to speak and won't be able to.
I know, but I'm trying to figure out when they would anticipate that we would do the item.
They would probably just do what I would do, is just check in periodically to see the status of the meeting and when the item's going to come up.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, this is Cecil. Looks like we do have Susan Carlins, the one person that would like to speak. She's
on item 2 or back under public comment?
I believe this was public comment, but I'll defer to the acting city clerk.
Andrea?
Yes, she wanted to speak under oral requests.
Okay, well, now that she's there, let's go ahead and go back up to that item and have her speak.
Okay. I am now allowing her to speak. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Is that now, am I now unmuted?
Yes, you
are
are.
now
Thank you. You guys are impressive with your Zoom layout. Continuing to meet. I'm Susan Carlins, and I've lived in the same house in Campbell for 29 years. As you probably know, today is George Floyd's funeral. And since I don't have 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I'll get to the point. As you consider the budget for the coming year, now's the time to plan how policing priorities should affect the budget.
Okay, hang on a second. You are under item 1, you're not under you're under the budget, right?
I'm talking about policing policies.
Okay, sorry, go ahead then.
That's okay, no problem. I urge you to do whatever's necessary to take and fulfill the pledge to enact the 8 can't wait use of force policies and to publish the results on your website. Some cities are reconstituting their police departments at this time due to severe and unrelenting problems. Unfortunately, in our city, we don't have that, but we want to prevent that tragedy. So I strongly recommend you adopt these 8 preventive policing policies, which research has shown can be effective in decreasing violence. The 8 can't wait policies are simple, common sense, and would make our community safer. I'm hoping you will commit to making public how many of the 8 Campbell's already enacted and to enact the rest as quickly as possible. Let's have our city get ahead of problems with a preventive approach. So these 8 include policies on banning chokeholds and strangleholds, requiring de-escalation, requiring warning before shooting, requiring exhausting all alternatives before shooting, the duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, institute use of force continuum, and require comprehensive reporting. Could be we have all of them. I have no idea. I may have looked at the wrong place on the website, and if it's there, good for you all. I know San Jose, I think, has done all but 3. So I just really urge at this time, this is the kind of time that we need to look around and see what we need to be doing to prevent some of the problems we've seen all around us.
Thank you, Susan. Items under public oral requests, we are not allowed to be discussing because
Got it.
Okay, but what we can do is direct staff to look into this further.
Sure.
So I appreciate your comments. I've received probably 30 emails about this.
Okay.
We can't discuss it as a council, but we can send it back to staff to look at a future date.
I understand and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, all of you. And
Thank you.
everyone, be safe and be well.
Thank
take
you very
care.
much.
Bye-bye. Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor,
I'll leave now.
Madam
Please.
Mayor, if I could just give you an update that there will be a document posted this afternoon in regards to that discussion.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you, Police Chief Berg.
thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so now we're back to item number 1, and we were to the point where we were going to have Brian start the conversation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is part of our annual process that we do every year to adopt our fiscal budget for our fiscal year. And for members of the public that are participating, the city operates on a fiscal year that begins July 1 and runs through June 30th. We're closing out one fiscal year and preparing budgets for next year. And obviously things have changed over the last couple of months. From the time that we did mid-year budget adjustments in early 2020, and we thought that revenues and expenditures were going a certain direction. It quickly changed in March with the pandemic, and we have since made several cuts and some dramatic changes in how we operate under our current budget with regard to staffing levels and service cuts and contract cuts. Looking forward, what we are hoping to do today is to have a discussion with the council about the projections that staff has put together based on what we know today. And the problem with what we know today is that the situation is quickly evolving and things are changing daily with regard to projections, with regard to what revenues we expect to be coming in, and even what services we're allowed to provide under the shelter-in-place order, and what services we need to provide to the public, and what are those real essential things that we do. We're hoping today discussion of what we are providing the council is a baseline budget proposal, and we're prepared to have Will Fuentes, our finance director, go through the budget at a high level, kind of give you an overview of the budget and what it looks like. And then we're going to ask for each department to provide some context to the budget. It's not necessarily going through line item by line item, every budget number and every budget cut, but to speak more profoundly about how this pandemic and the fiscal situation that we find ourselves in is impacting the services that department provides currently, how we're impacted currently in the proposed budget, and then to look at 3 scenarios moving forward of what it would look like if we were to implement additional budget cuts at 5%, at 10%, and at 15%. And the concept that we're trying to shoot for is to have some discussion and understanding of what those service cutbacks would be with those budget numbers, so that when we need to pull the trigger on them, can do so rather quickly. And so the concept is to talk to the council and develop a budget that we'll bring back to you on June 25th for consideration. We'll have kind of this baseline budget and then have an understanding of the acceptability of the service level impacts and the cuts in each of the 3 scenarios that staff is proposing at 5%, at 10%, and at 15%. Staff's committed to continue to update council on a monthly basis going forward once this budget is adopted, and be prepared with those updates if the situation changes to implement additional service cuts and budget cutbacks as is found acceptable by the council. What we're hoping to get from the council today is some feedback on the initial budget proposal and some feedback regarding the reductions in the service level impacts that staff will be discussing with each of the scenarios. We expect the council may not like some of the scenarios. You may not think some of the cutbacks in a particular department or program are as severe as could be. And likewise, you may find that some of the service level cutbacks in one department or program are greater than you would like to see. And we're hoping to get that feedback from you today so that if we come back on June 25th, we will fine tune those scenarios for the council's consideration moving forward. A complete understanding that what we're presenting today may not be aggressive enough as cuts for the council, and then the council may determine today to provide some direction to go ahead and look at additional tier 1 cuts, which would be 5%, or tier 2 cuts, 10%. And council may choose to go ahead and provide us that direction today. We're hoping, as I said, with each of the department's presentation, to describe to you in a meaningful way what that means to the public. What we presented in the document talks about how we're trying to maintain services by utilizing existing staff to backfill. But in reality, all of these cuts, even the basic service level that we're proposing in the budget, does have impacts to the public. Some of those very minor, and some of those not as dramatic as others. But you'll find in some departments, for instance, recreation and community services is probably more greatly impacted with regard to the programs and services offered. We're hoping that through this discussion, we'll have an understanding of where to come back on the 25th, and we'll refine that, both on the operating budget and then a discussion on what we call our capital improvement program. And those projects that the city spends time and staff on. So there is an impact from an operating budget when you have staff participating on projects such as street resurfacing, such as the JDM Park and other capital improvement projects. So what we're trying to do this year is make giant strides to helping the public and the council understand, when we do our budget, all the ongoing capital improvement projects that are carrying over from previous years. Past, the city has done what we call a carryover action of the council in the fall, and that is have the council in an October or November time period take carryover capital projects from the previous year and approve them to be carried over into this budget. That approach is that it takes those ongoing capital projects out of context with the rest of the capital projects. And what we're trying to do this year is present to you a bigger picture of all of those projects so you can have some context when you're approving the capital improvement budget, how many of those projects are carried over from previous years and what are those amounts. In addition, to complicate that, we've included in the capital budget the funding sources associated with each of those projects. Some of the projects get quite complex with the funding sources, so we can help you understand that to some degree. In my mind, a great degree what we're trying to solve with this budget crisis is what we're calling our general fund. And that would be anything in our general fund that is affected, our operations, our expenditures, our services. Those are generally operating budget issues. And to the extent that in our CIP, we also have what we call capital improvement program reserve. Those are also general fund uses. So when we do get to the CIP and you identify a funding source as being CIPR, that's equivalent to general fund money that's being used to support projects. Not that the other funding sources aren't significant, but those are the ones in my mind that we're focused at. And at the end of this presentation, we hope to get an understanding from the council, both on the operating and the CIP. What I do want to mention is that we have members of the public that do want to participate in this discussion. And we'll have, I'm sure, many questions from the council on this. I'm hoping that a lot of the questions and comments are addressed in the staff presentation. So it would be my recommendation to the council as far as procedurally that we go through a high-level overview by our finance director, followed by each department head providing a high-level discussion on the service level impacts to the public as a result of the budget proposal and scenarios 3, 4, and 5, or tiers 1, 2, and 3 in equivalent of what that means. And then take a brief recess at that point, let everyone use the restroom or get something to drink, and then come back, take public comment on that presentation and answer questions from the council. If sounds appropriate, that would be my proposal.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate what you just said. I would agree with, I can't see anybody else because the slide presentation is up if people are agreeing. I can't see anybody other than you, Brian.
And Will, can you pull the screen down?
You can,
There, okay, so everybody's okay with how we're going forward? Paul, Liz, Rich, do you have a question?
yeah, I mean, back to what I said before, I'd like to see us allocate as a council sometime, not just what we've done every year. I've been on this for 8 years now, is every department gets up and we respond to that and we comment on that, and then possibly there's something in the end, but I'd like to see some amount of time allocated at the end where the council can talk about these issues, not per department, but total. This is something that's higher priority than that. It may be a department, it may be across departments, etc.
Okay, Liz, do you have a comment?
I think I'm supporting what Councilmember Waterman said. Perhaps after Will completes his overview, there might be an opportunity, just a thought, for council members to just go around the table and say what we think about or have questions about for the big picture. And that would help the following presentations focus a little bit, maybe.
I like that idea. Anne, do you have any comment? No, Paul, do you have a comment?
No, I'm in agreement with what just been said. Both. I think they're very similar, so I agree with that.
Okay, so to reiterate what we just said, we're going to have a presentation by Will. We're going to pause for a second and let council make some broad level either questions or comments. Then after that, we'll go back to each department making a broad conversation. Then we're going to take a break. Then we're going to come back and have public comment, and then we'll come back and have the final discussion with council. Because we have to end at 5, I want to make sure we leave at least a half hour at the end for the unfinished business item number 2. So we're shooting for no later than 4:30. Hopefully we can get done a little quicker. I will say something before Will starts. There isn't a mention in here of what the council priorities and strategic planning that we came up with. So in the back of your mind, think about what we said were our priorities. For instance, open space, long-term planning. I forget what the rest of them are. I have to look up the list, but keep that in mind, because some of these, when we talk about cuts, that may mean that our priority, it may, like open space may not happen as a priority. Okay, so now do we want to go, Will, you want to bring up your slides now, please?
I can, council. I will pull them up right now, and then I will proceed as well. So just a second on that, and then I will pull them up. All right. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So again, high Rand council. A good afternoon. And thank you to council and all of our internal departments and all of our internal teams in putting the proposed budget and a CIP together. It was certainly a big change that we all had to adjust to. But we did all adjust quickly. And I did just upfront want to thank both the council and our internal departments and teams as well. So in terms of the total proposed budget across all of funds, that would be both the proposed and also the CIP. The total amount of the proposed budget and the proposed CIP is 86.5 million in total. And then in the general fund, it's a 56.7 million in a total in terms of a cost. In the current proposed budget before the council, we do show about a $2.9 million deficit in the general fund. That right now we propose to draw down upon reserve funds to cover the account. And so on the screen, you see that our total income across all funds compared to the end of the year projection for 2020 does increase a bit, about 1%, and also our cost decrease about 12%. In terms of the general fund, our income does increase a bit, and I'll go through the details of the income increase quickly. But we are currently projecting that our general fund income will increase about 1%, but also our cost will decrease also by about 1% as well. And then again, for any deficit in between general fund income and expense. We currently propose that any a cap be covered by existing existing general fund reserve accounts. Due to due to the due to the projected deficit in the current year, our reserve accounts could go down by about of 4 million in a total, and they would equal about 11.8 million in a total. Then under our current proposed budget for 2021, they would go down an additional of 3 million in a total and equal about 8.9 million in a total, which would then equal about a 15.8% of total expenses and be about 2 months in a total of our general fund expenses. So if you go to if you go to pages 18 and 19 of the proposed budget, it will also detail the purposes of each of our general fund reserve accounts as well. So in terms of income, we show that our property tax income should continue to increase in 2021. We expect to continue to see our growth in the upcoming year, but it could also decrease in 2022 as well, and it will be a thing that we pay a close attention to, because it is the biggest income. It is the biggest income area in Campbell and in the general fund. We do expect to see a decrease in our health tax accounts. We expect that retail spending will continue to be slow, but we also expect that since the economy is beginning to open up again, that we should also see increased spending over the course of the year, and it will impact what we taken in taxes as well. But 2 years, we do show about a 10 a 10% decrease. In terms of our charges, we also show about a 10% decrease over 2 years, but it also takes into account that our rec programs and our camps are able to open up again a bit in June, and they will continue to open up and increase over the course of a year. But we still show over 2 years about a 10% decrease. In terms of a TOT, though, we do expect that that hotels will continue to be slow in the upcoming year in 2021. And we also expect that over the next 2 years and potentially into 3 years, that hotels and travel in general, both personal travel and then also for companies will continue to be slow, and a TOT will be depressed. We expect about a 37% decrease over 2 years. So it is a definite area of concern. But in terms of our permitting income, though, we do expect that most bigger developments will continue to proceed, and we are projecting over a two-year time frame about a 58% increase. In the proposed budget as well, is a $10 million a bond that we would issue tentatively in August, and it's also taken into account as well. In terms of our cost, we've also put into a place about $500,000 that could be spent on COVID type expenses to help to purchase a PPE, to continue to virtualize what we do, so that we are able to decrease our face-to-face contact with the public, To also to redo our public counters, and also to help in whatever way that we could to help the local businesses as well to recover. We do also and anticipate that we will put through a claim to AIMA as well, and we will try to claim and cover any and all expenses that we are able to. In terms of our personnel costs, we are our total permanent FTEs are decreased by 0.83, and also our temp payroll our temp payroll costs are also increased as well. Our total costs in a payroll do go up about 3%, but it's due to cost some adjustments in our healthcare costs, in our PERS pension costs, and also any cost adjustments that are due in a labor group contracts. The current contracts are currently under discussion, and anything that comes from those discussions could also increase the potential general fund cap as well. And then in terms of our supplies and contractual accounts, we've taken every steps that we can to reduce those types of controllable expenses down to only the core is essential items that we need to continue to run in the upcoming year. So again, in general, we've cut down on our supplies and contractual accounts in the current proposed budget. We've also through a internal accounting, we've also taken down our IT pool charges that get a charge to different departments under the general fund. And then in terms of the CIP, we've also cut back the CIP a lot to take into account reduced internal capacity. And also in the CIPR to ensure that the amount that we take from the general fund to help to pay for a capital is small, so that we can continue to help the general fund to the greatest extent that we can. So act gives a it gives a broad overview of the proposed budget and the CIP, and then this next part of the discussion you would go through each department. So I will now take a break, but I will also address any council or public questions up to now.
Okay, you need to take down the slides for a second so I can see people. There we go. So Rich, I'll start with you. General comments about what we just heard. You're on mute.
I mean, again, I'll listen to everyone else. As I said before, I'm trying to sort of translate this to services at some point, but it doesn't sound like we're getting into that yet. So I'll hold off till then.
Yeah, we're not into that yet. Anne? You're on mute, Anne? Nothing? There you go.
Sorry, I had to switch computers because I was having technical difficulties. I just had a couple questions. Is this the appropriate time to ask that, or?
Yeah, to what Will just presented.
Yes. In the one of the early slides, Will, you mentioned that the proposed total city expenditures for FY 2021 are going to increase 8.7%. Does that include personnel costs? Is that an overall increase across the board?
Let me just go to that again. So
Okay.
give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. So in terms of the in terms of the total cost, in terms of the total cost, the total cost increase of 8.7%. It would also include a personnel cost as well.
Okay. And then on the license and permits, you're projecting a 58.3% increase. Can you talk a little bit about what that projection is based on? I mean, that seems a little optimistic to me, given the current climate that we're in and the unstable economy and not knowing how quickly we're going to rebound from this.
Okay. So I will turn turn over the question to the community development director to address that one.
Okay, maybe we can just wait then until we get to his presentation. That's fine for me. we don't have to really go out of order.
Okay, I mean, that's also okay.
That's fine with me. Thank you.
Sure.
No more questions, Ann? Okay, Paul?
Yeah, thank you. No, I mostly hold off now because I think when we get to the what's being funded, what's not, they'll answer some of these questions. And I agree with the question Councilmember Bybee just asked. And I was thinking, I like when I hear from each department head, I think that may answer some of those questions. I think it's then going to generate a lot more questions, and I'd rather do them then once I have more information.
Okay, Liz?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, you're done, Paul? There's a little lag here.
That was just a thank you.
Okay, sorry, there's a little lag. Okay. I'll have to take a longer pause before I start. Okay, Liz?
Okay, so I thank Will and the staff and everybody. I mean, this is an awesome task to do, and you've got new technology. So I know and appreciate how much work it was. But I think there's a couple of questions that I'd like you to confirm because I think the council will want to discuss them later. First off is there is a core assumption that this recession will be over quickly. It's going to be what they call a V as opposed to a lazy L. And there's some inconsistency, which we can talk about later, but there is, I believe that by fall, things will get better. And by January, things will be pretty well back to normal based on what I read in the document. Is that accurate? Just a yes or no is fine.
So I can address it a bit. And it's dependent upon what income stream that we're about. Again, in terms of property tax, I don't expect a increase in a 21. I think that if we do see a increase, that it could occur in a 22. But
Excuse me.
again,
Wait, hang on a second, Will.
Sorry.
We're getting off the question she asked.
I was just trying to ask a simple yes, no, in broad terms. This document.
Yeah, and I understand that question, but it's also
I know it's got convolutions
It's
and funding and all
complex as
that.
well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but there is a statement in the document that indicates that this is going to be over sooner rather than later.
So in terms of a V-shaped recovery, I expect a U-shaped. There are certain components of income that could be a V-shaped, or also not impacted at all. But in general, I expect a U-shaped recovery from July through June.
Thank you. So then there's another section of the report that I think ties into what Councilmember Bybee has stated. The written statements in the front of the report use different fiscal years as the baseline, and your presentation did the same. You used fiscal year 2019 actual you used fiscal year 2020, you used fiscal year 20 estimated at end of year. And I tried really hard to figure out what was going on, and I'll just simply say, you chose to use fiscal year 19 than the recently approved mid-year 2020 budget. As a result, you ended up using the fiscal year estimate, which are dramatically different because of COVID. So you showing increases of 19% or 56% or whatever, it's based on the low number at the estimate of 2020, not based on a normal budget.
Is that, I'm trying to understand, is that
Yes,
a question?
Is that, so is it, is that a
question
or
is,
a comment?
yeah, the question is basically you use different numbers throughout the report. In the end, some of your summary slides refer to the estimated end of year 2020, which is a really low number in many cases. So when you show big increases of 14 or 50%, it's based on an artificial low. It's not based on a normal year.
Correct. And so when we put when we put the proposed book together again, we can also attempt to show the current 2020 adopted a budget, so that you are able to compare against a typical budget a year as well.
So that will be helpful because I tried to come up with the dollar amount associated with all the cuts that were expressed. I couldn't come up with a dollar amount. I went to the spreadsheets for the expenditures, and it looked to me like the expenditures were higher than what was approved for 2020. I couldn't get any of the numbers to just figure out. I can't figure out how much we're actually cutting the budget. The only thing I can think I figure out is that we're letting all the part-time people go and backfilling them with existing permanent people. And then I look in the individual budgets and that doesn't seem to work. So I just had a very difficult time trying to figure out exactly what we were doing. I just couldn't figure it out.
Okay, and we can again we can again insert a additional column that would show the adopted 2020
Thank you.
as well. Yes.
Okay,
From
any more questions, Liz? No. Okay, I got a question. Back on one of your slides in the early part, it said you were only decreasing essential costs. Don't you mean non-essential costs?
So I'm going to that right now.
If you want to bring back up your slides, it's in the beginning or maybe midstream.
Let me see, I'll bring it up right now. And I think I know the area that you're discussing. So it's the one here?
No, I think it's back. it says right there, reduction to supply services and capital outlay to essential items only. Why are
So-
we doing a reduction? I thought it was a reduction in non-essential items.
It is, so it's a reduction of a cost, only a, a, a down to essential items only. So I mean, I do agree that the way it's the way that it's written on the screen, and also in the budget intro, can be a bit conf- 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 confusing. So it's a thing that we can adjust that.
Well, okay, so I don't understand. Okay. It says reduction of supplies, services, capital outlay to essential. So are you saying we're reducing down to essential?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you meant you're reducing essential items
No.
Okay.
no.
to own. Okay, I get what you're asking. I get the way it's worded. And then, let's see, what was the other one? I can't remember right now. I was trying to take notes as everybody was talking. Okay, so does anybody, we can go back to the main screen of everybody so I can see. Okay, do we have any more comments to date? And then we're going to get into the staff department by department, and then after that, public comment. So at the staff department presentations, we're keeping it at a higher level. We don't need to get into a lot of detail at this point. That would be after public comments. So Brian, are you starting Public Works?
Yeah, I'll be glad to start. I think the administration city manager's department is first. And, you know, in a budget proposal that before you, we have taken down certainly training expenditures. There is a vacancy of the deputy city manager in my department right now. And so we have brought down training expenditures. What I really wanted to speak to is you know what the impact of that is to the public and the services that we provide. And a lot of what we do in the city manager's office is administration, so it's not really as outwardly facing. But the deputy city manager position being frozen through December will result in additional staff trying to backfill those services that was provided by that position. It does support the CIC commission. So it could be that there's additional staff that's try to meet the demands of our Civic Improvement Commission and the programs that they run. Things like the photo contest, a lot of our grants, the neighborhood grant, and the association grants will be impacted in that we'll have less staff to support that function. So it may take longer to support those actions and programs of your Civic Improvement Commission. I also think that a lot of what this administration does is service the public. There's a lot of random questions and issues that come to my department that don't neatly fall in another department. And the deputy city manager often leads those responses. So that public phone calls, questions and inquiries to our department may take longer for an answer. We're still going to work hard to provide immediate responses to the members of the public to let them know that they've got the request, but to actually get them answers to the questions may take some more time. To the city clerk and human resources, As the council's aware, we also have a vacancy in the city clerk's program, in that we have one clerk serving the role that was previously served by two. Right now, we're seeing service impacts of phone calls going to voicemail in some cases instead of being answered live. Still working hard to try to be responsive to those phone calls within 24 hours. Right now, we're seeing approximately 10 phone calls a day that are being retrieved via voicemail, and I would expect that that will continue. We're expecting to ask the council to consider filling that city clerk vacancy before the end of this fiscal year. However, I don't anticipate that vacancy will be filled in any case prior to election filing season. And so our city clerk that is working in that program right now will have to dedicate more of her time to election stuff, which may also cause some service impacts to others. They're reaching out to the clerk's office for questions or answers. Again, the commitment to respond to people quickly, that we've received their request and provide them a time estimate for when they may get the response that they are requesting. But things like public records request will take longer to be filled. And support for questions, general questions and answers will probably take longer. With regard to human resources, has limited impact on the outside, but certainly in this pandemic, we have frozen our hiring process. So the staff that is normally dedicated to recruiting and retaining our employees has been rededicated. What we're finding is the decrease in recruitments and the actions we've taken during this pandemic have certainly led to a tremendous increase in unemployment claims, to the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act usage, to emergency sick leave usage, to the need to deal and process with telework agreements for our employees that may not be working from the office. And then, of course, helping and working to support our labor meet and confer process that we're going through right now with all of the labor groups. I imagine that those impacts will continue on through this fiscal year. In both these additional scenarios that we're proposing in the budget, we talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, which is a 5%, a 10%, and 15% reduction. I would imagine those delays in services and the time impacts to respond to citizens' concerns will be increased slightly.
Brian, can I ask one quick question? What's the difference between scenario, because on your city manager's office slide, it says scenario 2, and then it says scenario 3, tier 1, scenario 4, tier 2. So how does the scenario rate relate to the tier?
So in regard to the city manager's office, in scenario 2, the budget that we're proposing to you, we're recommending that you freeze the deputy city manager position for 6 months.
Okay, so then how does that relate to the tier? That's above the 5% cut?
Yeah, so the additional
Okay.
tiers, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, that additional 15% savings, if we were all to tier 3, can be accommodated with continuing to freeze that position for the entire fiscal year. We would accommodate the savings of 15% by just taking that position and continuing the freeze for the rest of the year.
Oh, okay, sorry to interrupt you. Are you done with your department?
I am, that was it. And I can certainly answer questions with regard to that discussion.
I was thinking we would take questions after everybody.
That works fine for me.
Okay, so who's next?
Sorry, may I ask clarification, Madam Mayor? I
Yes.
don't understand why it's scenario 2, 3, 4, and 5. What happened? Where's scenario 1?
Scenario 1 is where we were before the pandemic hit in our draft budgets and where we were previously. And that all got thrown out the window with this.
Okay.
Presenting to you as already revision. And then there's 3 more tiers on top of that we can add.
Okay, but council never saw scenario 1.
Scenario one would have been essentially where you would have been, should your mid-year budget have played out to
Yes,
year.
but we never saw it. My point is, we just never saw it. That's why I was getting confused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm confused, the tiers and the scenarios. Okay,
So let me try to clarify from a staff level, when we started working on the budgets, when we were in March and we were just finishing up our mid-year report, we were looking at a scenario. That is what we're referring to as scenario one. That-
Okay, that's fine. That's
It
fine.
got thrown out the window. So what we're presenting is scenario two. And then referred to as tier one, tier two, and tier three would be the additional cuts on top of that.
okay. So scenario 2 has cuts as proposed in the documents attached. Then in addition to those cuts, scenario 3 would be I'm going to call them the base reductions plus the 5%.
Correct.
Okay. All right. What department's next? Legal.
Yes, I believe it's, am I? No?
Yep.
I'm on. Okay. Yes, legal services. Basically, scenario 2 really only involves reduction in the amount provided for continuing education services, which would amount to, instead of allowing for 2 conferences a year, it would allow for 1, assuming that there are going to be conferences over the next fiscal year, which I suppose remains to be seen as well. Scenario 3, which is also known as Tier 1, it would involve a fairly significant reduction in the amount of hours by my office. It would amount essentially, in terms of trying to put in context what that would mean the kinds of things that were long-term, long-standing issues that we've been whittling down would in effect have to be frozen again, such as work on the subdivision ordinance, work on regulations for large cell facilities, large cell cellular facilities in the public right of way would have to be frozen, and things like work on updating the business license provisions to the municipal code again would probably have to be frozen under scenario 3. And again, scenarios 3 through 4, I would just mention, obviously, there are a lot of imponderables out there that we don't know that could affect any of those. For instance, if we get a large litigation matter, that could throw a lot of this off. Scenario 4, which would involve approximately a 302-hour cut in my office's services, would basically limit those services to doing day-to-day work. It would impact pretty much all long-term kind of projects, including the updating of the public works contract. Would probably have to be put on hold as well. Well, unless we found unless we found a way to do away with the day-to-day demands for legal services. And then finally, scenario 5 would essentially cut back even into the day-to-day demand for legal services, which of course would be difficult to do, find a way to triage those. I suppose that would also impact the city manager's office in trying to spend time figuring out what needs to be done right now and what can be put off. So I think that's it in a nutshell anyway.
Thank you.
All right, so I will go on to the finance department. note upfront that I've got both internal and also external external customers. We do accounting, the budget, AP, uh, uh, payroll, and we also receive receive income over the counter. We're a tiny group of 8.8 FTEs, but we do accomplish a lot with each a person, and each and every person plays a key role in the department, and also plays a couple of different roles. But our costs are also mainly personnel costs as well. So any reductions that we do, any reductions that we do past a scenario do will in some way or impact our personnel as well. I hate that it does, but it's again due to our cost structure. So there's not a choice up there. In terms of a scenario two, we would like to outsource our business license of function. We would still keep our current 8.8 FTEs, but we would purpose some of people so that they could oversee the new contract, but also address some projects, and also increase what we are able to do from a accounting and a budget perspective, and so a job duties would change a bit. In terms of the contract, we also the main purpose of the contract is so that we could also obtain an online business license application and a payment program that would then be in sync to our building permit of processes as well. And we also expect that due to the outside contract, that the outside company could spend extra time on audit, on a, a, a discovery and on a compliance to ensure that every company in town that should obtain a business license does. So we do expect an income increase to offset the cost of the contract. But again, if we go into tiers 1, 2, and 3, then it would impact our personnel and our team. In tiers of 1, there will be a decreased speed to our payments of bills and also to record and receive income. In tiers 2, there will be a continued continued reduction in the speed of payments and also in the receipt of income. And then in a tier of 3, we would choose to take payroll outside, and also purpose certain members of our team as well. So it's not in any way ideal, and there would for sure be a pain in our department that would impact both our internal and external customers, and cause delays in what we do every day, every week, every month, every quarter, and also over the course of the year. It could slow down the budget, and it could also slow down the capper as well. And that is everything for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will go on to Paul.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. So let me just start with responding to the question that Council Member Bybee asked, and it had to do with the observation that licenses and fees are going up substantially. So, you know, going into this pandemic has created a lot of concern, and what's interesting on my end is I'm not seeing that as much. You know, I'll give you a pretty good indicator. Within the last month, starting May 4th to June 5th, received $305,000 in building permit applications. We get about 27 to 30 application submittals a week. And on the planning side, we received $134,000. We get about 3 applications a week. That's almost $500,000 that we received. So that's a pretty good sign that there's some confidence out there, and people aren't hunkering down and, you know, saving their money. They definitely feel that they can keep going. Now, in terms of my budgeting, so I budget pretty conservatively, and I know there's been some concern of that because it's good to identify what the available revenues are so we can use them. So what I do, this is my approach. My approach is to identify projects on the building side that have already received planning entitlements. And I can list those. We have Cressley Homes, we have Chester Mixed Use Project that's on its way to planning commission. We have the Pruneyard Office Tower and parking structure expansion that's been approved. We have a 59 unit apartment project with club room and underground parking that is on its way to be scheduled for planning commission review. The Dell Avenue project that the city council approved. We have the Mozart project we're getting ready to schedule it for planning commission. So these are projects that we know have either been approved or scheduled to be reviewed by the commission. And we check in the applicants. In fact, we did that about a month ago, just so I made certain that if they were to receive approval, would go forward. And the response unequivocally was, yes, we are ready to go. We have our financing in place. So when you calculate these projects on the building side, the permit fees actually would be about $4.2 million. And what I typically do is there's a realistic expectation with whatever that dollar value is. So then I pull back. This is the conservative approach. I pull back about 30% of that. So it's considered a 70% probability that these projects would go forward. And that gets us to about $3.5 million. Now, and that's only on the building side. Compared to last year, we budgeted 1.9 million. So there's your increase. We had 1.9 million last year, and we're over that already. And during a pandemic, we're already over that. And then compared to anticipating this next fiscal year, there's your delta, there's your change. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to go through that. Otherwise, I'll continue with my presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. So, you know, we run a pretty lean ship here. There's been certain low-hanging fruit decreases, minor though, professional development meetings, dues, memberships and books. These are things that I can cut, but in order to get to one of these tiers, the tier 1 is a 5% cut, a tier 2 is a 10%, and a tier 3. You need to start looking at positions, unfortunately. So on the 5% cut, tier 1, we had the last 2 years a part-time building permit that was a consultant. We needed because of the amount of projects we were processing. You know, now that we have our new online system, we kind of feel that technology is going to take the place of that position. So thank you very much, Council, for allowing us to pursue that. It's a good service to the public, and it's actually saving us money. We have a part-time code enforcement officer that we've contracted the last couple years. That would be like a $60,000 savings, as well as our economic intern savings. That's what gets us to the 190. The service impacts, the level of service decreases, if you will, certainly will be on the code enforcement side. You know, we're going to have back to one officer handling all these cases. So the level of service will be a little bit slower. And once again, we'll start seeing in cases accumulate. And with economic development, in this recovery, that's pretty important. So we would be down from one individual with an intern that was working about 20 hours a week, just basically Michael and myself. But Michael's very enthusiastic, and sometimes I like to think that he's 1.5 people, not just one. The 10% would be a little bit tighter for us. I would have to freeze the building official position, get that big chunk of money. It's working out really well right now with Bob Lennon. He's our senior building inspector, who is just seamlessly taken over as our acting building official. And I think he's doing an amazing job. So freezing the building official position is kind of an easy decision, because Bob's doing a great job and the building division is working very well. It just, we wouldn't have a building official, but Bob has the certifications necessary to serve in that capacity. And then the 15% would involve freezing, of course, building official, as well as freezing an associate planner. As you know, Stephen Rose elevated from that position to senior after Cindy McCormick left, and having the associate planner position and building official positions frozen will help us get to that 549. In every scenario or tier that I've looked at, it also involves the reduction of the contract permit tech position. So it has its varying degrees of level of service reduction, but I feel confident that the team we have is very strong, and we'll continue to. That's it.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. So for Recreation and Community Services, our department is a little bit different, as every time we make an expenditure reduction, there's generally a correlating revenue reduction as well. So to actually get through all of those just sole reductions and preserve revenues is a very challenging task for our division. So in the initial scenario that's presented for before you this afternoon, we are doing the best that we can to preserve revenues, utilize FTEs or full-time employees in program areas where we can, to kind of limit the expenditure need during the short term as we recover out of this pandemic. So as these programs and services are allowed to come back online with the new order, we are putting them through the lens of cost recovery and trying to make sure that everything that we bring back online has that as a priority and the main focus as to what can and cannot be brought back. Some of the assumptions that are made in this scenario were based upon the information we had at the time. And it seemed that phase 3 was a very long way out for us. And so the first 6 months in our budget seem to have our FTEs kind of helping to support some program areas without temporary personnel as much as we have in the past, as we kind of recover and build back into some of our robust programming. So in this scenario, we have a recreation specialist that is currently vacant, and it helps support our adult services program. And so this would be frozen through the fiscal year. And so some of the impacts to that would be the support needed for the senior nutrition program when staff has vacation or is sick, limited ability to help support the front desk and answering inquiries and supporting those program areas there, reduction of senior trips and programming. In the administration side, One of the things we're proposing is to not print and mail our activity guide, which is our main marketing piece for all of our programs. This will save some money in the short term, but also will have some revenue implications associated with that. We have reduced our temporary personnel for customer service clerks across the board for front desk as well as adult services, and utilizing our full-time staff to help answer phones and respond to email inquiries. And this is going to, relate to more phone calls going to voicemail. Summer is our busiest month, and just with the most recent release of the new guidelines, our phones have increased dramatically with, anywhere from 20 to 50 voicemails a day that we're having to respond to, as well as email requests and inquiries. Our adult services and senior nutrition program. So at this point, it would have some reductions to our senior programming. This is a vulnerable population, and although our whole job is to help promote and rule out senior isolation, it's unfortunate that this is also a vulnerable population. And so we are anticipating reduction in classes for this population to utilize adequate social distancing. A lot of the clubs and programs and things that would be supported by the recreation specialists will be suspended until further notice, mainly because the social distancing guidelines couldn't be met for those groups. There would be the elimination of our financial contribution to the countywide RIDE program, which is a subsidized program for seniors for transportation. So we would be no longer financially contributing to that program. For the community center, one of the major program areas in this one is our room rentals and spacing for churches and gatherings and meetings and special events. And so we're anticipating a reduction in that as we move forward. But as we can get those back online, we will. And we have constant requests and email and phone inquiries about events later in the year that people are requesting. So in the interim, we will eliminate building attendance for setup and breakdown, and utilizing full-time staff to modify schedules to accommodate those rentals for setups and breakdowns. We're eliminating the summer concert series for this for this summer. The bike ballet program, which was a program supported for the farmers market on Sundays, will be eliminated. Last summer, we did a pilot program for the non-reservable sections of our parks to help with some of the enforcement out there. So the park ambassador program would also be eliminated. And for the museum, we're looking to limit access to the general public. So switching to more of a time ticket, and so that we don't have to pay to have staff there to manage the facility in hopes that people come, but that it would be a scheduled visit for people to come through the museum, and we'd be able to monitor the number of people inside at any one time. The Ainsley House tours would be suspended through the year, and this would have some significant impacts to the foundation and their ability to do some fundraising. We would have no field trips. We're anticipating no field trips for the schools in the fall, and the potential for limited field trips in the spring, which could be managed with limited support staff. Booking of the Ainsley House would get transferred over to staff at the community center to do that processing and permitting of that space when applicable. And the conservation and preservation of our collection in the Historical Museum and Ainsley House would continue to be maintained throughout the year. We have a three-quarter supervisor in that department area that during the summer months will be helping support some of our summer programming and kind of reallocating some of those job assignments to program areas that can be used. For the theater, May and June are some of our largest months of bookings. The dance studios and doing their dance shows is a very large rental client of ours through those months. And there's quite a few dance studios that still want to have some opportunity for their students to perform. They have reached out to staff inquiring about having their students do their performance and live streaming it over the internet and selling tickets that way. So the staff at the theater has come up with a tiered approach of reopening our building. They've mapped out ways to conduct things as we are allowed to hold events with numbers of people and what that looks like in a seating chart and how that can be structured. And that's a phased approach throughout the year. We'd also only be doing the shows that we are currently under contract with for a season. That did not happen this year, or that were already put into motion prior to the pandemic. Venue Tech, who is our contractor who manages the theater, has also waived their CPI for fiscal 21 and the upcoming year. In sports, aquatics, and fitness, so the assumption here is that gyms and fitness would be one of the last things to come back online prior to large events, and it seems like that is changing. Our assumptions in this, we've canceled adult sports leagues until next spring. Our drop-in fitness programs and our fitness classes, there's some significant reductions in that area. We're looking at full-time employees managing the drop-in fitness during the lunch hours to help reduce some of the costs out of the gate so that we're not having to bring employees back on until we can rebuild some of those program areas. There'll be some reductions in our youth sports classes. Swim team, we're looking to postpone a little bit until we can get back online with a full-fledged pool. And if that is even operable moving forward. We've had to cancel the Oktoberfest Fun Run and potentially may have to cancel the Valentine Fun Run as well. With the pools reopening, we're looking to do a modified version where it's a reservation only on a per lane basis for people to use until our fitness center can reopen, then the fitness passes will be available again. Our staff has worked hard in the preschool day camp and enrichment classes division to come up with a modified version for day camp this summer based on CDC guidelines. And so we're operating at about a third capacity of what we normally do. And we're hopeful that by next summer, even if we have to have similar modifications, that we can operate at a much larger capacity than we are because we'll have done it and been under our belt. So we're also looking again in this program area using some of our full-time staff to offset some of the temporary costs for the program areas in our preschool program, as well as day camp, and reducing some of our class offerings. And again, all of this is in the lens of as things come back on, making sure that they are cost recovery. Our department as well also is responsible for paying all the utilities at our campus and the museum, which equates to almost $500,000 a year. So as we reduce expenditures, there's some hard fixed costs in our budget that just simply can't be reduced. As we move forward in these reductions, we did some significant dial backs in that first round. The next one, and you can change the slide, Will. In scenario 3, it contains everything from that scenario 4. We'll do some increased reductions for our senior class offerings. Reduce temporary personnel for the Ainsley House rentals and manage with some of the community center staff or temporary staff over here. Reduce personnel in our fitness center and aquatics, and probably dialing back what that program looks like completely, and the removal of the work experience program, so eliminating the opportunity for high school students to work in different departments throughout our agency. The next slide, Will. In scenario 4, we would have to reduce our workforce. It's the only way to kind of meet the reductions that were requested from finance. And so depending on where that is within our division and how we streamline the service model that we offer, that could have some significant service level impacts to our community with some more reduced availability to the public and ability to respond to phone calls and email inquiries in a timely manner. We would eliminate the senior trips for adult services. We currently have case management services that we would reduce in half, and this is a really critical role for this population of people for looking for services anywhere from housing support to legal support, and the referrals that we provide out of our agency is very helpful to that group of people. The museum would become closed to the public, and we would reallocate job assignments to some of the staff. We would reduce some temporary personnel support for the Heritage Theater. We would close the skate park to the public completely, and there would be additional reductions in the fitness arena. In the last tier, this would include everything that was said there. We have water delivery service for our staff, part of the health and wellness that would get removed. We would pretty much wipe out our professional development opportunities, and the current vacant director, Recreation Community Services Director position would remain frozen through fiscal 21, which could also have some very significant impacts on our department and our and how we deliver services throughout the whole year. That concludes my presentation, and if there's any, I guess questions will be at the end.
Yeah, questions will be later. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone and good afternoon. To try to walk you through the reduction proposals from Public Works Department. So in what we are calling scenario 2, which as Will earlier defined and clarified, it's essentially reducing down our supplies, materials, and consultant services and special project costs down to essential levels. We looked at this strategy going not only through our general fund allocations, but through our other operational sections as well. And what we have come up with is that from a general fund perspective, we can reduce operating costs by approximately $94,000, and in non-general fund costs, by taking a similar strategy, we could also reduce an additional $20,000. We will also be cleaning up some of the funding cash flows that flow between the city and some of our partner agencies, such as the West Valley Clean Water Program. And so although that may look like a significant reduction of expenditures, it's also a significant corresponding reduction of revenue. But the bottom line of scenario 2 is that it reduced operating expenses by about $114,000. And we feel that the service level impacts would be minimal. There could be some delays to having to respond to unforeseen activities on projects or unforeseen operational issues. And that's what having the additional funding was often used for. But in the event that those sorts of scenarios present themselves, we may have to look at alternate funding or coming back to council for some sort of a budget adjustment at that point. Now, looking at the more significant scenarios, I will say that essentially Public Works is in somewhat of a fortuitous situation because we have a fair number of vacancies that we can work with that maybe can help minimize the impacts of this across our workforce. So in scenario 3, we would be looking at freezing a vacant assistant civil engineer position in the CIP, in the capital projects management section of engineering. That would result again in reduced capacity to manage capital projects. We might be a little bit less responsive to changes along the way. That doesn't mean that we won't be able to accommodate those, but there might be an extended lead time or an extended time for us to resolve certain issues. We do believe that under the scenario, we may see a slight increase that certain services would have to be contracted out as they relate to capital projects. And the workaround, I guess you'd call it, or perhaps you'd call it the solution on that, is that we would be able to bill directly to the capital projects on that. So we don't see that as a significant issue that presents itself in scenario 3. There would also be minor reductions in part-time hours across the various work sections. And what this results in is a $230,000 worth of savings to the general fund, which coupled with scenario 2, our cumulative effect of this puts us up to about $324,000. Taking a look at scenario 4, It's everything that was talked about so far, but what we would do is we would take the vacant building maintenance worker position, which is a fully loaded $158,000 position. That would result in the reduced ability for us to respond to certain day-to-day needs and certain tenant issues, predominantly at the community center, but also at City Hall. It's hard to define the impacts on that at this point because, as you just heard from Natasha, some of the workload associated with that will be determined by how open for business we are at these facilities. So the more programs and services that we are providing and allowing at the community center, there's usually an increased need for maintenance that goes along with that. And the same would be true here at City Hall once we open to the public. Don't see this as a catastrophic hold at this point, though. We think that not unlike the vacant civil engineer position, that some of the issues and which are addressed by this position could be addressed by the increased use of contractual services. There could be additional lead time as we prepare contracts and things of that sort. But I think that this is also a completely doable solution if necessary. And again, just like scenario 3, there would be an increase in the reduction of part-time hours across the various work sections as well, ranging from engineering to parks maintenance to street maintenance, which what that does is that gets us up to a cumulative total of general fund savings of about $609,000 at this point. And I would also add that under scenario 4, we would take a look at our need to do fleet replacement in the upcoming fiscal year. And having already pared that list down from the initial list of vehicles that qualify for replacement from 500,000 down to 300,000, we would take that down even further to about 210,000 for vehicles that would be replaced, and we would defer the others at this point. We do believe that there could be, as I mentioned, there could be some delayed response times, but just how bad that is, we'd have to keep a watchful eye on how open our facilities would be and what services we would be providing, particularly in conjunction with recreation and community services. Scenario 5, again, building upon the previous 3 scenarios, we would recommend holding the park supervisor vacant for the entire fiscal year, which would result in about a $205,000 savings for the fiscal year. We are currently backfilling that with an in-house position. We're using the city arborist for that. So there is an increased amount that we need to compensate that individual for working out of class. We've already factored that in to come up with the $205,000 figure that you see there. And again, even more of the part-time hour reductions, particularly in parks maintenance, is where you would see the biggest impact in scenario 5. And again, like I discussed earlier with the building maintenance worker, our parks are not functioning as they typically do. We're not seeing the organized group activities, but we do know that things like day camps are going to begin to make a reappearance here under the altered shelter-in-place order. But we also know that our residents are getting out in their parks and trails and open space areas on a very regular basis, and it is resulting in the need for increased litter pickup and restroom cleaning and other things that just kind of contribute to the health and safety and overall aesthetic of the community. Plus, it is that time of year when landscape likes to grow, and we're seeing an increased need for mowing and weed abatement. And so if this continues with our current use patterns, I think you would see some impacts to parks and open space and our trails under scenario 5. I should also note that under scenarios 3, 4, and 5, all of the vacant positions that have been referenced, Those are also scalable as well. We have detailed this down to a point where they're each held vacant for an entire fiscal year. Those could be made scalable, much like what you heard Brian talk about with the deputy city manager. We would have the ability to strategically freeze any one or perhaps all three of these for the first half of the fiscal year and come back at mid-year and revisit that. So that remains an option as well. And I would also like to point out that even though I'm discussing a fair amount of our vacant positions, the one position that you did not hear me discuss was the vacant building maintenance supervisor position. That one has been vacated for a few months, and we feel that that is a very critical position that needs to be filled. So we are not recommending that for any sort of reduction under any scenario. And our hope is that we would be able to move forward with filling that position as soon as possible. And that concludes my presentation at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Good afternoon. I think it's the police department's turn now, and I wanted to start by saying that this was a very challenging endeavor to do with our budget, the way it's structured, and how our revenue is directly associated with the personnel we have. And we spent a considerable amount of time going through and trying to find ways to make these cuts to get to scenario 2 and 3. And there's a lot of different factors that are all tied together in our budget. And I think it's probably easiest for me to start off with our personnel changes, because really the only way to get us to a 5% or more cut is through personnel cuts. And the priority for us is public safety. I know that's a priority for the community. And in order to provide that service, the sworn positions who are uniformed officers out in the field responding to calls, dealing with issues on a daily basis, that's important for us to keep those staffing levels where they are. And when you look at staffing levels throughout the county and the ratio of officers per 1,000 residents, we're actually the second lowest in the county of officers per resident. So when we went through this exercise, put a strong focus on keeping those sworn officer positions in place, which are obviously the most expensive positions in the department. So with that in mind, we looked at what other personnel changes that would be appropriate. And I think our budget is a little bit different in the fact that we're actually asking to add positions. And I want to explain that briefly. One of the positions that we're asking to add is a public safety dispatcher. And over the last year, we've reevaluated the scheduling and structure of how our dispatch center works, because we've identified that over the last several years, there have been major overages in budget on overtime usage in that division. So over the last year, we've done a change to the staffing model and schedules, and identified that with a 10th dispatcher, we would be able to reduce the overtime significantly. And I'll give you last year, for example, there was $200,000 in overtime spent, and the year before that, there was $156,000 in overtime spent. So by adding a dispatch position, it's actually offsetting the overtime that is being used to fill those spots. So I think that addition will suit us well, and the cost will be offset by the amount of overtime that we're going to be saving in that division. The other addition that we're proposing on making is a 0.5 temporary training coordinator position. And this is something that we haven't had before. But one of the cuts that we are looking at, this 0.5 temporary unbenefited position would be able to fill that gap. And when we're talking about some of these non-sworn positions that we're looking at changing as they currently stand, think this was an opportunity for us to look at our staffing model in certain divisions, and from an efficiency standpoint, what makes the most sense. And having the need to cut our budget significantly, I was really focused on finding a way to do that while also increasing the efficiency of our department. And I think that the proposed changes in scenario 2, while it does impact current employees, does meet the challenge of making our department more efficient while also having a budget savings. So with that in mind, one of the other major changes we made was a decrease in overtime budget throughout all of our divisions, and that's a pretty significant number. And I feel very confident that that especially in this coming year, we'll be able to accomplish that, even though there's a lot of unknowns in our job and things can change fairly rapidly. In terms of our expenditures, I think it's important to note that while we were able to make significant cuts to the budget, there are also over $100,000 in increases that are based on contractual obligations that we have with certain vendors. And I'll give you some examples. The Cal ID, the county's automated fingerprint system, went up by $25,000, and our law enforcement communications system went up, and radio maintenance. So all these essential items that were tied into these budgets, that went up by $100,000, but we were able to cut significantly to offset those increases. And from a revenue perspective, like I started off with, the revenue is directly related to our staffing, and we have very limited ways that the police department collects revenue. And I'll preface this by saying I think there's a common misconception that we go out and write tickets to make money, because really it costs us more money to write citations, and the purpose of writing citations is not to collect fees and bring in revenue, but it does do that in the end. I mean, the primary purpose of that is obviously traffic safety, reducing accidents, and creating safer environments in our community. The other service reductions in scenario 2 that would impact our community, one of the 0.5 PSA positions has really been assigned to the Creek Trail, and that position has identified homeless encampments, done the marking for homeless encampments. So and that spot is currently vacant, and with the removal of that spot, it would definitely have an impact on our response to homeless encampments, especially along the Creek Trail. And our officers would have to fit those responsibilities in with their normal calls for service, but I think that wouldn't be as responsive as we currently are. There's also a elimination of a 0.2 police clerk, which does a lot of data entry for our records division. So that would add some amount of workload to our current records division. But really, in terms of service level reductions, I'm pleasantly surprised that the scenario 2 will allow us to have fairly minimal reductions, because I think it's very important that the service or service level and service standards that the police department has had for a number of years stay intact, and give the community the service that they expect, that they've grown to expect. Scenario 3 was a little bit more difficult, because once again, it's directly related to positions, and with the philosophy of trying to keep the sworn positions available, it does have some more impacts, and some of those impacts to service level would be downtown parking enforcement. And that obviously has a direct result on the revenue. That would be even though it would be an elimination of a position, it would also be a reduction in revenue from parking citations. Also, if the decision was made to go with scenario 3, that would be the elimination of patrol CSOs, which have had a huge benefit for a number of years. They weren't, we didn't have those patrol CSOs after the 2008 budget correction. And many of you may remember I was actually a community service officer a number of years ago, and we were fortunate to get that position back. And in looking at the numbers, our patrol CSOs handle over 1,000 incidents per year. So those incidents would then be needed to be handled by officers. They take over 700 reports, and those reports would be then transferred over to officers. So there would be potential increases, even though those are non-sworn positions, there would be potential increases in response times for sworn officers, and things such as extended traffic control, scene security, towing of vehicles that are done currently by a community service officer, that would then need to be handled by an officer, which could impact the overtime budget, which would then impact the overall budget at the end of the year. The other issue, the service level reductions with scenario 3 would be the elimination of our abandoned vehicle program. And that does also bring in revenue, and it is one of the areas where we get a lot of complaints. So those complaints and those abandoned vehicles would no longer be the responsibility of a community service officer. It would be the responsibility of a sworn officer. And obviously we prioritize our calls, and abandoned vehicles is lower on that priority list. So that would there would be delays in the marking of those vehicles and a decrease in the revenue based on the number of vehicles we'd be able to mark and tow. And also from a traffic perspective, no, we wouldn't be able to utilize our radar trailers. Those are put out by our community service officers, and definitely have an impact in our ability to respond to all of the traffic complaints we get, and make an impact, not just in writing tickets, but reminding drivers how fast they're going, and encouraging them to follow the speed limit on that one. So I know the other departments have talked about scenario 4 and 5. I haven't presented a scenario 4 and 5 because the only way to get there would be the elimination or freezing of sworn positions. And if the council decides that's the direction they want to go, I'd be more than happy to articulate what service level impacts that reduction would have. But I have a multitude of concerns on those other scenarios. And those service level reductions would be pretty impactful to our community, and that's something that I want to avoid at all costs.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Do we have any more slides? Fire. Gary, is that yours?
We were going to have the fire chief on, available to answer any questions. I don't see him on here. I can just briefly go over this. We even though fire is part of the public safety budget, it is kind of its own little piece of the pie, because it's a contractual relationship, and the contract has very specific language on annual cost increases, and that cost increase, as you can see on the slide, is going to be 4.67% next fiscal year.
Gary,
So,
Gary, to interrupt,
Yes.
but the fire, this is Cecil, the fire chief is in fact just joined us.
okay, great. Chief Bowden, I think you're on mute.
Try again. How
Hi.
about now?
Yep, we can hear you. Hi, Tony.
Hi. So I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
So what we're going to do is we're taking public or presentations, and then later, if you, I don't know if you can stay on or if the police can answer, but we're not going to do questions probably for another half hour or more, or comments.
Chief Bowden, I don't know if you could just take a minute just to explain how the contract works and the great relationship we have, but that those numbers are, I think you can explain those numbers better than I can.
Sure. So the contract is based on a formula which reflects CPI increases, COLA, cost of living increases, and assessed valuation. And that runs the other way as well, because we have a second contract with the city of Campbell where we contract for Campbell services, and we use the same formula for the increase in that contract. I think that covers about 2 detective positions to assist with the arson program, which has been incredibly successful. Over the years, County Fire has been the contracting agency for fire service with City of Campbell since 1993. And we're pretty proud of the fact that the organization runs fairly lean and mean. Back in 93, if you recall, there were 2 fire stations, 2 fire engines, and a squad plus administrative staff. When we contracted for services, we reduced that to just 2 stations and 2 engines, reduced the squad, relied on the administrative staff of County Fire and the surrounding fire stations to augment the firefighting force in Campbell. And over the last 27 years, there's only been 1 position in 27 years added to that contract, and that has been in our Fire Prevention Bureau for an inspector, and that was added last contract cycle because there's been so much building in Campbell, and we have state mandates regarding the inspections of those buildings. So that's where we're at today. We've kept personnel costs down from the perspective of not adding additional positions on the response side of the house in 27 years. Campbell is our busiest fire station, the Campbell station off of Union, and City Campbell is our one jurisdiction that runs the most amount of fires in that city. So I will hang on for a half an hour. That should be a brief overview in history, and I'll be happy to answer questions when we get to that point.
Thank you. Okay, is that now the end of the slides?
So it's the end of the department slides. There are a couple of additional until we get to the CIP, but we could take a break on now, and then also get to the questions for the departments as well. Mayor.
Okay, we're past the 2-hour mark. I'd like to take a break. Is 10 minutes enough? I can't see. Will, can you? Yeah, there we go. Is 10 minutes a good enough break? I see Rich saying yes. Okay, so we're taking I'm sorry, was that Liz?
Anne said yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Anne said yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little lag again. Okay, so we're taking a 10-minute break. I'm going off video and I'm going on to mute. So it looks like we're coming back right at 3:30. Okay. Okay, it's 3:30. Liz, are you back online? She crashed earlier. You're on mute if you're back online.
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble, but I think I got it. Thank you.
Okay, we're all back here. I see everybody. Okay, so we're going to start back up. I'm going to do a little time check. We said we were going to bring in item number 2 at 4:30. We're now at 3:30. Brian tells me he has about 5 or 10 minutes left to talk about the CIP. And then we're going to go into public comments. Andrea, how many do we have that want to speak out in addition to the desk items?
We don't have anybody that would like to speak during the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Brian, you have 10 minutes, 5 minutes would be good.
Thank you. I think Finance Director Fuentes is going to take this.
I am, and I will also attempt to be quick. So to give a quick overview of the CIP, there are 54 a total of CIP projects. There are 13 new in a total. If you also were to include any carry over amounts, and also the measurable projects as well. It's about an 83 million dollar a CIP. In the proposed CIP book, we do detail each of the different projects, and we also show anything that was approved a project from the past, that could still be an ongoing project that contains a carryover amount. In year one, we anticipate to spend a 6.9 million in a total. And also as discussed before as well, we attempted to cut down anything that we could from the CIPR.
I can't, Will, you went to mute, Will.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Okay. And are you able to see the screen? Okay. So I won't go through each of the CIP projects, but again, the details of each of the new CIPs are in the book. And then you will also say a $50 million a project that would cover the measure of projects. So it's all the now. There are also a couple of ongoing CIP items that we're proposing in a total that they also be increased. And there are also a listing of projects that were approved in the past by a council that are being that will still continue until they are done. And again, the details are again in the book as well.
Okay.
So that is, I mean, the end of the CIP, and also just the next steps from now until the end of June, and then also into the fall as well.
Thank you. Can you bring back up the pictures of everybody?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we have 40 minutes. I'll go through, start with Rich, Ann, Paul, and then Liz. So let's make comments or questions. If each person stays within 5-10 minutes, we'll be good on time. So Rich?
Nothing at this point.
Okay, this is your chance though, Rich. No comment, nothing changed, no, okay. Ann?
So I had some questions that I didn't really receive an adequate answer to regarding some of these projects that are carryover and there's a budget remaining. And in the interest of time, I don't really want to go through each and every one of them today, but I would like to have some kind of understanding where the project is and if the funds can be reallocated, if the project's completed. I need some additional information. So either that can come back to council if need be, or I can meet with Will or Brian.
We'd be glad to meet with Councilmember Bybee to go through those questions.
I have the same questions.
I have the same question because if I look at new capital projects, there's very minimal that are actually year one, which year one is the 2021 fiscal year. But there's a lot of existing projects. For instance, for Santa Masa Kino, there's 371,000. And is that what's left in the contract? And do we have to spend that to get the grant reimbursement? So I think those are kind of questions that we're going to want answers to. There's things like the, what was the other one that's in, anyways, yes, there's several capital improvement projects that I think we could have them either put on hold or extend them out another year. Okay, Paul, you're next.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little confused of what you want to cover now, because if we have, everybody's gonna have comments on capital improvement projects, right? So
This is all everything combined, not just capital improvement.
The comment just made about capital improvement, I guess, it's hard to do that independently unless we're gonna come back then and accumulate everything and then still present them to us as a whole, right? Unless I'm missing something. As far as reviewing, Mayor, you just said some may have to be moved out, some may be postponed or gotten rid of. but we have to have those discussions, right? So I'm kind of at a loss at how we begin that discussion if someone meet individually, and that may be a good thing to do. How do we address CIP today?
I was hoping we would be able to address some of the CIP. So
If people have concerns about CIP, I guess we should do them when we can hear about it and discuss it rather than get our answers independently, because I think we're gonna have to come back then and redo it, right? We're gonna have to eventually meet as a group to say, oh, I don't agree with that, or I agree with that. So I don't know the efficient way to do that.
okay, how about if we do this separate from CIP? Is there any comments or things that you want changed on the different scenarios that each department presented? How about, and then after that, we go into the CIP.
Okay, fair enough. Let me make some just general comments. I mean, I don't think that necessarily I should, you know, if a department head is cutting expenses, I'm hesitant to say it should be done this way or that way. They're doing it, I believe, to maximize the service levels that they can do. Some things that stood out to me, for if we're looking to expand the savings, for example, we have a deputy city manager position that is proposed to be frozen through the calendar year. To me, in the fiscal year, which doubles the savings, we can always come back mid-year and decide this economy has come back sooner and we're in better shape than we thought. We might have logic to do that, but those kind of things, I wouldn't be rushing to fill those positions. I put the city clerk in that same position. We have somebody in there now. Let's at least go through the calendar year, and in that case, we'll see how that goes. But just looking at my notes here, I'm kind of happy to see, especially in finance and public works, that in talking about expanded cuts, we got right down to positions and what those associated savings were, which I thought, I appreciate that because it was very specific. I'm a little confused when I looked through the recreation and community services proposals, because in the 5% proposal, it has some services where the temporary workers functions are picked up by the existing full-time staff. But if I look at the 10 and 15% cuts, should we go there, it eliminates temporary positions that I thought were gone earlier. That was I see Vice Mayor nodding. It was very confusing to me because it seemed some of them were where appropriate. I think in some cases it's not appropriate. If we keep this pool open, there's not a full-time person that's going to be the lifeguard. So I know that there's a temporary there. But it's funny to me, or confusing to me, and maybe Natasha, you can answer. It seems like we're eliminating temporaries up front, which is good, but they're there in scenario 2 and 3, and I'm not sure if I'm reading it wrong. Are they different people?
Yeah, so I mean, in our division, we had 180 temporary staff that were laid off. So it's across a variety of divisions. Where appropriate in the interim, as we bring programs back online, we're doing our best with our FTEs to minimize some of the costs associated. So I have 2 FTEs that are lifeguard certified. And so for a portion of the day when we have lap swim or when fitness programs come back online and there's a guard who's needed, when at all possible, if an FTE can be used during that first 6 months, we're going to try to use an FTE to minimize the expenditures while we rebuild our programs and bring our revenue back up. In other areas such as camps, we have 3 FTEs in that division who will be used in ratio to help offset some of the costs associated with that program area. I'm trying to see, we kind of took some of the ones for where we were uncertain when they're going to come back online. So our goal is to kind of minimize that a little bit. Is there a specific area that I can help make clearer for you?
Tell me if this makes sense. Maybe I read it wrong. So some of the ones I see where we're eliminating a temporary position in let's call it scenario 2 and 3, that's what we call 10 and 15, they are different positions from the ones that were reduced in scenario 1. I realized the number of temporaries you had. So it
Yeah.
seemed to me like we were eliminating some, but they were really still there. We're talking about different functions.
That or more hours have been reduced. So as scenarios go forward, when we have building attendants and we're saying we're taking them out through December and putting that back in January, in the next scenario, that extends past January. And so it's a reduction. If we're using 1,000 hours of temporary personnel, and that might be 3 people over 1,000 hours, we're reducing it to 750, and then we're reducing it to 500. So those reductions were kind of strategic, and a lot of that is going to be dependent on, you know, how quickly we bounce back. And so the way scenario 2 is presented is it gives us enough flexibility to be fluid if and when things come back online in the next 6 months, and also to come back to you at mid-year to say, this is how our revenue is presenting itself, and this is how we're forecasting what we're going to need moving forward, and if we need changes, and the revenue to associate with those costs. We're hoping to be able to clearly lay out for you.
It's frankly easier to understand with the explanation than it is reading the document. I mean, just because the document's very confusing. So let me ask you, since you're here, you're on the spot, I can pick on you a little bit.
Go for it. And happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, but
yesterday. I didn't see you yesterday, but yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell the world. So I know a lot of your things, the revenue pays for the expense. I get that. It's a one. So the only comments I'll make on certain things, we have some things in there about, for example, rentals at the Ainsley House. For events, it seems to me, since that closes down the winter anyway, and people have to plan some months in advance of an event, it's unlikely that we're going to have rentals there, I would think, into next spring or so, maybe later. Just my guess. If that's the case, are we taking the expenses down to the bare minimum so that, you know, the facility is maintained and all that, but really it may be empty? And I'm going to have the same question on the museum. I don't foresee, because we don't even know what's going to happen with schools, of school buses coming up and coming in there. You mentioned something about virtual tours. If that's not a live tour, but a recorded tour, can we take those expenses way down? They're bad facilities, but because we may have 6 months or 12 months or more where they really don't get used. So
you would be surprised there, you know, for the Ainsley House, there's still some bridal holdouts who are really hoping that that the guidelines will alter enough that they'll still be able to hold their wedding. But yes, so in that regard, we have some funding in place for an on-site person for a day of any events that potentially could take place next spring. But the booking and permitting of that was done by a temporary personnel prior, and we'll be shifting that over to our office specialist here at the community center to be that point person for that location moving forward. And then for the museum, the supervisor in that division has a really strong relationship with local schools and teachers in those schools. And when this transpired and shut down those things, the need for academics and field trips for children in a virtual format is definitely needed. And what that looks like and feels like still needs to be sort of developed. So that would be an option moving forward if you know, bringing children to our museum wouldn't be an option for them, so that they remain relevant and, you know, helpful to our local school districts. As far as visiting the museum, the Ainsley House is off. We won't be conducting tours, but at the museum, we're looking to do a ticketed entry. So instead of having the museum open from 1 to 4, I now purchase a ticket to visit the museum at 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. And so there's a time slot for you and your family to visit the museum, and we can provide adequate social distancing during that time frame. And then also, you know, disinfect. It's a touch museum, so it's different than other museums. And, you know, being able to properly clean in between visitors will also be imperative. But it provides staff and the opportunity to know when someone plans to visit versus just being open.
Okay. I'm hoping we're looking at maybe should the schools be impacted greater than we think? Maybe we think outside the box and look at ways to take some of the materials to the schools and rotate them or something. I don't know. But hopefully
Yeah.
like that.
And we have that right now. We have a trunk where they can, purchase the trunk and it's delivered. And so, yeah, and that takes staff time to develop that type of curriculum that can be delivered or downloaded or have videos, and having quality, material to be presented is important for that to have a value associated with it.
Okay. And lastly, I'll just say, hopefully, if we're reduced to the pool to renting some like that, I assume you'll be monitoring that to see if there's demand that pays for that, if it's a good use of limited staff time. I mean, just to have that, if we restricted the use so much, it's a very small usage. I don't know if that's the case or not.
You cut out right at the beginning when you started speaking, so I missed.
Yeah, just my comment on for things like the pool as an example is we're greatly reducing the availability and maybe down to some rentals. Because we're going to come back at some point, 6 months or whatever, and look how this is all working. That the number of people that are actually doing that are more than at least paying for the service, and or the time it takes of the full-time staff to be part of that is worthwhile versus something else they could be doing.
Agreed.
So
And this is how
flexible.
we're approaching it to finish out this fiscal year, and as we transition into the new fiscal year, because we're trying to minimize bringing on temporary personnel as we finish out this fiscal year, especially. So this is the model we're going with. It's pretty limited. And if gyms open, that will open up our ability to open our fitness center, which would make our fitness passes relevant again. Without having all of our amenities available, it limits our ability to make that punch pass worthwhile and valuable. And so we're trying a different service model in the interim to kind of offset that.
And these are all based on the theory or the hope that the service cost, the fees will fund the program.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Appreciate it. No, explanation helps. Thank you. Mayor, just one more comment. Let me comment just on PD if I can, and hopefully the chief is still on board with us. There he is. Thank you. That's probably the hardest part to cut. I think just credit that you have among the highest safety here, but without affecting the field people. So without this affecting the service levels, I think they're most important to the community. So I appreciate that.
Councilmember Resnikoff, I apologize for interrupting. You are breaking up. You need to speak more consistent to your speaker, please.
I'm not moving. That's weird. I haven't moved.
I think it's the signal.
I literally haven't moved my chair. So is it okay?
That's better now.
I haven't moved. So I'll just quickly comment that I was, as much as you don't like to see any cuts, you like to see that the service level stays the same. I think there was a comment made at scenario 2, then service level reduction would be very minimal. So appreciate that. I think that unfortunately we have to prioritize not just department to department, but within a department, the functions. And I think that was a good model of getting fairly substantial savings versus some of the others instead of what's the important service level. So, so thank you for that. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Liz. Sorry, excuse me, Liz.
Okay, so I'll try and be brief, but I do have a lot of comments. One is the council needs to make a decision. The base cost that's in the budget assumes $2.4 million use of reserves. I am not supportive of starting out with a budget that uses reserves yet again. We just used over $4 million for last year's closeout. I do not support going forward with more reserves. The reason I don't is that we really don't know what's going to happen in 3 or 6. I'd like to suggest that we start low and we put in contingency in each department's budget that says if things do in fact get better in September, then they can start using that money. I like the idea of each department using the money to the way they feel best. I have no problem with that. I have specific comments, but they're not nitty gritty. So I'm not supportive of that. I do think all training should be one of the things that goes out. I think we need a really hard look at training. I understand that layoffs are the lowest priority, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have to face the bullet on that. And I do compliment the PD for, I thought, doing an excellent job of presenting what they were doing and biting the bullet. But I would use that as an example. If you look at the summary of PD, if I read it correctly, and thing that we don't have to answer this minute, but it is a problem in several budgets. The between last year and this year actually went up, even though they're supposed to be saving $399,000. I realize costs increase and all of that.
You're frozen up, Liz. As you guys, I can't hear Liz. Are you guys, can you hear her?
No, and she was choppy before that to me. Now I'm hearing what she heard with me, yeah.
Liz, we can't hear you and you're frozen. Can you hear us?
Totally locked in.
Brian, can you call her and check what's going on, please?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to chime in while we're waiting to find out what's going on with Liz. So I would concur with what she said about the dipping into the 2.4 million in reserves. I don't support that. I want to start as getting as close to our budget as we need to without using any reserves. There's things that I quickly wrote down about like this business license outsourcing and the payroll outsourcing. Maybe that's only 260, 70,000 savings, but look at that now and get that moving so we don't have to dip into the reserves. I didn't hear anything about the field rental. My understanding in the past, that has not been a cost recovery item that we are subsidizing, that was a previous decision, but at this point that needs to be on the table of looking at the field rental. And I know that policy is going to come forward in a little bit. I wanted to know, and maybe this goes into the CIP, but how much of the $17 million of street maintenance could we take out to have towards this budget deficit? Brian quickly texted me something about that it's only $200,000. But now between that and the outsourcing, maybe we're up to $500,000. I also want to know, what's it cost to close Campbell Avenue each time, Todd? Everybody's making comments right now, close Campbell Avenue, let's have outdoor dining, but there is an expense associated every time we close the street. And we haven't been having the farmers market, but we want to bring the farmers market back. Is that a cost recovery of the cost to close the street? And it's not just public works cost, it's PD cost also. Are there any other winter events? There was a mention of not having Oktoberfest, but isn't there that holiday thing where the kids all come and we bring in the ice? I didn't hear anything. But we still have to close the street. And so my question is that a cost recovery? Is DCBA paying for that to close the street, or are we incurring city costs for that?
Mayor, if I just may, the Oktoberfest was specific to the fun run, not the downtown festival. I'm not speaking to that.
Okay, so are the downtown festivals all paid for by who wants to close it down, or are we subsidizing them with our staff time and expenses?
I'm not aware of that answer. Someone else.
So Susan, really quickly, those special events permits are typically subsidized by at least 50% when those are approved.
50 or 15?
50%.
Okay, so I would want to know what that is. How many are there planned, and how much is that that we're putting in 50%, that's still, we're paying our money into that. And again, I don't support using the reserve. I want to get to a balanced budget as soon as we can in July. So Liz, you got cut off. I'll let you go back.
Go ahead if you want, and then I'll pick up.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I think council needs to make a decision. I support not having use of contingency at this point because of the unknowns going forward. And I believe that's consistent with what surrounding cities are doing. We also need to have a discussion on revenue options. There's some presented by staff that need to be discussed and perhaps some others. For the museum, the school program is funded typically by the foundation. They pay, I think it's $10,000 a year to fund that. I think other donations are put in about $50,000 every year from the foundation, similar to what the police and others do. In terms of specifics to city manager, I think the city clerk should be separated out. It is in fact a separate department, so I think that needs to be separated out. It's a little hard to understand all of the budgets because of the fact that they used the end of the year. So I'm sorry, I just cannot see where we're actually saving money. I see, like PP did and some of the others, some dollar amounts, but I don't see it in terms of the overall. Oh, and if you look at the spreadsheet that goes along with city managers, it seems to show full staff all the way through. It doesn't show positions vacant or frozen. Measure O doesn't show support staff. It seems odd that the whole year would go by without Measure O needing some support staff. Includes, I think, council raises, so council could make a decision on that. There's nothing in the that talks about the PS events that are going to be coming. Legal, I think we have to talk about renegotiating costs overall and seeing we can find less expensive ways to do certain things. We've talked about it a long time, but I think we really do need to look at it. Financing, the loss of the business licensing staff. I didn't really understand what value shifting people around would push. Didn't see that. You asked about the payroll. I had that question. Are we doing online payments and aren't we saving money from cost recovery of the charge cards costs? Didn't see that anywhere. It may be incidental, but I got the impression it was around $50,000 a year. Community Development Department going on now for sure. It's wondering if it's an ongoing trend. There's definitely competing views whether it's going to go up. So it's one of the reasons that I'm nervous about making too many assumptions about large projects going forward. We also have to remember that large projects take a long period of time. There's a statement about staff that seems inconsistent between the written part in the front and the backup part. Also, large projects can pay for their own inspection. We have expedited inspection and expedited approvals that might help keep staffing costs down. Still not sure. The chief building official, I thought that was a legal requirement. I'm not sure that we can say that can stay away. I've asked that question for a while now and haven't gotten a clear answer on that. Also, there's $150,000 from MTC staff applied for, and hopefully the governor hasn't taken away. So that should be considered. And we also talked, and I think the mayor just mentioned, and Councilmember Reznikov as well. I'm totally supportive of understanding each department's programs that is self-sustaining, which in our case, community development is building. But I need to really understand what self-sustaining programs are versus essential services. I just don't see a good, clear discussion of how we're doing a services. It's just not clear. Recreation, I see the cuts there. That was helpful to understand in your explanation. I appreciated Councilmember Ruff's questions. I really don't understand the assumptions about the facility and the staff associated with it. I agree that the senior adult programs are going to be really tough. And I'm assuming that they're not going to start again till January or maybe even June. We may have to make a decision about that. Same thing is true with the theater. I didn't read enough to understand. It doesn't seem to me that the theater is going to have much use at all. We have some contracts which we're not sure are going to go.
I lost her again. Do you guys have her on? Is Liz there for you guys?
I think she's frozen again.
So Mayor, she's frozen, and somebody that was watching texted me and said it got choppy for them and then their internet went out. There may be a Zoom problem, right? It may just be too much Zoom traffic. There's others outside our call are saying they're having the same problem.
Okay, Rich.
I can, until Liz gets back, I can talk a little.
Okay.
You know, as I said to you earlier when I was calling, I mean, I think anything going on here, there's budget, and then, Rose, can you put the
Bird bomb. The bird bomb.
put the parrot in the oven and, oh, sorry about that. It's a joke for anyone who just heard that. The bird actually heard it. He's quiet now. So anything we can do to automate things, I like, if it is good or not. I mean, if it's long-term good, we should still look at it. So payroll, online payments are things we've been looking at for a long time. I'm not sure why payroll is moving at such a slow pace. Can you?
Okay.
Is Liz back on?
Can I ask you a question?
What's
No,
that?
I'm back.
Okay,
No,
let
you're
me
back.
ask you.
One more comment. I mean, one thing I've talked to Brian about quite a bit is I think we need to modernize, what sort of positions here. Some of the things are sort of frozen in kind of a different time to me when I walk around. When I was in high tech 20, probably 30 years ago, they were already starting to modernize what they called a secretary, for example. It isn't somebody who's, using a typewriter anymore or just answering the phone. Well, we've gotten, it's something we have to look at, that if we're going to hire a clerk, that makes sense. If the clerk is going to have an assistant, Brian's going to, his group, the city manager is going to have an assistant, and HR is going to have an assistant, and several of the groups have two assistants, and what people that are more technical, pay them a little more and then have less of them. We don't need one for every department. And answering the phone, people are very used to these days. If they get a phone tree, they don't necessarily get somebody answer the phone on one ring. So I'd like to see different. The bottom line, without that specific example, is I like the idea of us looking at things. I have a whole list of them that we have to start looking at in different ways. And now is as good a time as any, because in the end, I think these things will certainly save money. We don't need to automatically say, okay, we're hiring a new something. If we're going to talk about a city clerk or we're going to promote the current one, we don't need an assistant unless we can define a very good technical job that person's doing just because we can do it. I mean, it's all over there in the thing that we want to hire all these assistants and assistants. Not everyone needs an assistant unless we have a good explanation about what that person is really going to do other than answering the phone and typing and taking care of scheduling. And I'm not knocking anybody. I just think, and I appreciate everything everyone's doing, but we do need to look at how we're doing things. And, I've talked to quite a few senior staff, and I think there's a lot of agreement on it. I just don't think anyone wants to talk about it now. I think it does need to be looked at. Thank you.
Okay. Liz, you're back on.
Can I try again? Okay, I'm trying to speak quickly. So I'm not clear on what's the expectation for the theater and rentals. We really need to understand what is cost revenue neutral and essential services. I'm totally in support of anything we can make financially viable, but it's just not clear in the material we've got right now. I also don't see anything that talks about cleaning costs. Also, if we want to cut energy costs, the city currently does the 100% renewable and 100% carbon free. It's about a $27,000 premium to go back down to green prime, which is basically 100% carbon free and 50% renewable. That's a potential another cost. I honestly didn't understand where your money was coming from. Happens to the frozen positions in the meantime. So I think I'm understanding better now after the discussion what staff was trying to present to council. Sorry, it's very hard. And I'm just saying it's just very hard. Are we doing the contractor for the maintenance of the medians, street medians now? I don't know what happened to that. We asked for all the contracts and all the consultants so we could really understand what our choices were to prioritize. And we don't have that. I totally agree about needing a senior building maintenance supervisor. That made a lot of sense. PD, appreciate everything that they did. I do want to talk about some other things. But that's a good, if you look at the summary on page 172 of the document, it shows the increase going up. And I can't match the numbers. I can't make it add up. And if you go back to the page that shows the pie chart, on page 29 of the actual document, there's columns that say charge to departments, operating funds, reserves, 1.966198. I don't know what that means. And then down at the bottom says interfund capital transfer of 14,000, whatever. I know that Will is coming up with new strategies on how to assign money. Are you frozen again?
You aren't. You're good.
Okay. I understand that there are new ways of organizing and doing money trade-offs, but I don't understand how in 2019, the budget was 73 million odd, and now it's 87 million odd. I know we are adding 10 million for the Measure O money, but I can't make it all come together. I don't know what to do and how to approve something without having some kind of a simple spreadsheet that actually shows what we're talking about. So that's when I go back to the basic principles of saying, I don't think we should have a budget right now that does uses reserves.
Okay, let me ask, I'm gonna start with Rich. I don't know where your picture went. There you are.
Here.
Mayor Landry,
Yeah, who's that?
it's Ann. May I comment? I misunderstood in the beginning. I thought you were only asking for comment on the CIP.
No, I was gonna come back to you, Ann. Go ahead.
Well, I haven't, you can come back if you want, but I haven't said anything so far about the budget. Everybody else.
Well, no. Okay, so I was gonna go back to you and Rich because you didn't make any comments. So I was gonna start with Rich. If you want, I can start with you.
Go ahead.
So Rich, now, do you have any other comments?
Rich did make comments. I again, as I keep saying again and again, I guess the council tomorrow, I don't know how to get into the discussion that I know the vice mayor wants to get into about kind of these nits and stuff. I think as a council, we need, like Ann was talking about before, we need to look at a list of services and prioritize them and let staff go and take it from there. What do we think is more important, higher priority, pick 8 or 10 of these, and I don't want to get into understanding because we won't do it. I mean, we can have another 800 hours of meetings, I don't think we're going to get to the promised land here. So I would like to see us prioritize services. That's what every other city, you know, Palm Springs, that's what they're doing. They prioritize services, and the staff has to go and figure out what to do with it.
So what would you be your first 3 priorities?
Well, I could do that fairly easily, obviously.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the police, public, security is obviously. We could go through it. I just want to see, I don't want to go through it if everyone's going to say they don't want to do it this way. If we want to go through and say, I want to understand where every single number is tied to, it's going to be a very difficult meeting. Do it in.
Okay, so I'm going to ask each one of you now. So I'm starting with you.
Well, that's my overall thing. If you guys say you want to go there, I could go there. I don't know where everybody else is. If I understand where Liz wants to go with it also, and we could go in that direction.
I beg your pardon, but I think you've misunderstood me.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, well, hang on, Rich. What would your 3 top priorities be? Things that we are like, either we don't want to cut them, or those are the minimal cuts. You said police, security.
Well, I mean, from a public point of view, we've got the public works and community services are certainly 3 important things.
But what within them? We can't just say public
No,
works.
I know. Let's see first if everybody agrees this is the way to go. If I'd like to hear what Ann thinks, if she wants to go in a different direction, or Liz, I may have misunderstood you. I apologize. I'd like to see if this is the way we want to go forward. We don't have a lot of time left, and we still have to talk about the other item.
Okay, well, we have 13 minutes left, so let me jump
exactly.
So let me jump to Ann, because I guess we did have a little misunderstanding.
Yeah. So you'll have to bear with me because I have notes kind of spread out throughout the presentation. First, I want to say that I feel that the budget that's being proposed is assuming that we're going to have an economic downturn that's going to turn around quickly, and its recommendation is the intent to use reserves and minimize staff reductions. And I applaud that, and I respect that. I personally don't want to make cuts to services and programs that are going to affect people being laid off, especially being laid off, without going through the exercise of reducing whatever expenditures we can, and I'll refer to it as a low hanging fruit. And based on the presentation, I still see some areas that I think that could be utilized to reduce some cost. First and foremost, I don't think that there should be any increases in staff development in the fiscal year 21 budget. I think that all travel and meetings should be frozen until at least December, unless it's an essential or mandated training. And I know that in public safety, some of those trainings are mandated. I think that we need to hold off on that. As far as the temporary positions, I was under the assumption that all temporary positions across all city departments had been frozen. And from what I'm hearing from the presentation, I don't see that, or I'm not hearing that. And so I think that all temporary positions should be frozen until December, until we get a better handle on how quickly this is going to rebound. It's much easier to reinstate a temporary function than it is to lay somebody off and then have to rehire them. Based on the conversation and the staff presentations, I've had a bit of a change on that. Well, as far as freezing all the positions that are vacant, I also think that we should be freezing all the positions that are vacant through December. However, with one caveat, I do really feel that the building maintenance supervisor position should be filled sooner. It is a critical position. It has been vacant, and there are really some important needs in the city that are not being addressed and should be addressed. And I also believe that the building official, we need to have a building official, and whether that's through a senior person right now who's backfilling as a building official, I think that needs to be filled on a temporary basis and filled and then looked at again in December to see if we're going to fill it with a permanent person. see. I also think that the supplies and services, that there could be some further reductions there. I think 2% reduction is a bit low, and that I think that needs to be looked at again, and possibly a higher percentage in reduction in supplies and services. As far as the finance scenario with the outsourcing of business licenses, I think that's a nice concept. I believe it needs further discussion with council. There's some policy issues and implications there in service to the public and what they have expected to this point in time. And when you go to an outside contractor, the level of service may not be what it should be. And I think that the revenues that are being forecast as far as what this outsourcing would generate is a bit ambitious, especially with the downturn. We have no idea how many of our current businesses are even going to be renewing their business license, whether they're even going to be able to function again. So I think that we need to proceed cautiously there. I think there should be a net reduction in the FTE if we're going to outsource that function in an effort to achieve any cost savings or greater cost savings than what's being recommended. And it also ties to policy issues such as zoning and home occupation clearances, in addition to building tie-in. Again, in community development, I think all the temporary positions should be held vacant until at least December. And I also, in the last comment, in follow-up to Councilmember Waterman, I do look at this as an opportunity for the city to really look at our services and our programs and how we deliver that model, and to try and achieve efficiencies where we can. And I'll come up with a couple of examples having to do with customer service in the building department. There's been discussion from time to time about consolidating the lobby there to have a one-stop counter so that you reduce your staffing and have a person that can direct people to whatever function they need. Many cities have that type of function. We have a current vacancy with in the Public Works Department with the Parks maintenance supervisor. And is there an opportunity there to consolidate it into one supervisor and have lead workers serve a function and be supervisors and report to that person? It gives a lower level of responsibility and employment growth to a lower level employee. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Do you support using the 2.4 million in reserves right now?
I support using the least amount of reserves that we can by utilizing the cost containment that I just went through and holding off or reassessing and to see how quickly this is going to rebound. I just want to make sure that the city staff and the city as a whole is utilizing all of their capability to reduce our costs before we have to use reserves.
So you are supporting some use of the reserves, but be as efficient as possible.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think we're able to get by without using reserves if we're gonna keep our staff intact without layoffs.
Okay, Rich, I forgot to ask you, do you support using the reserves?
Same answer as Ann. I think we can use them. Let's just be careful where we go with them. Again, my overall thing is let's I think I agree with what Ann was saying completely at the end too, that we need, if there are efficiencies we can do either high level or at the, delivering service level, if there's things we can do.
Okay, Paul, what about you? What about our reserves?
Yeah, so I think Councilmember Bybee hit it very well. I'm willing to use those reserves, and I think those reserves should be used prior to cutting specific people. But to the extent that there are other expenses we can do it. She mentioned, for example, supplies and things like that. We should be maximizing our cost savings in non-personnel costs before to determine how much of the reserves we should use. But I do put reserve use ahead of personnel cuts. We may get to the point, it may be that this takes longer than we think. We may get to that point, but that's not something you jump into as an if. You do it when you have to. If I can quickly comment on something else that the mayor brought up earlier. You talked about our fees paying for everything, and we've had this discussion in past years. We had a council member who never voted to reduce a fee to anybody, regardless of the issue, just because fees should cover the cost. I want to make sure that we don't talk about percentages. So for the street fair, it's 50%. I'm doing this from memory, but I think that 50% was $1,100, $1,200, something really small. We should look at the cost savings, because in the interim, even as we reduce costs, we're suffering like the businesses are. So things that we can do to accelerate the businesses coming back, which would include a street fair, which include change to permits of our retailers and restaurants. I'm willing to lose those fees if I have to. It's a few $1,000s total to help them back. But I love what you said, but 50% sounded awful. It's 50% of a closing the street permit, which is little. And I know the chamber's suffering because if they don't have the street fairs, they don't have money to operate. So I just want to put that in perspective. And last thing to say, you asked this of Councilmember Waterman. I mean, I haven't given enough time to have a full list, but if we prioritize, I certainly include public safety, and that's police and fire. And I include in public works, probably street maintenance, because it typically costs us a lot more down the road to do it later than now. And it happens to be one of the top 3 things that people want in the city. And also open space and parks and things like that. We've talked about that before, because I think they've become more critical as people are sheltered, and we may wind up doing that later in the year again. So those are the top things I would do. And last beyond that is anything we can do economically, economic development, to help businesses and everybody come back. And if in fact Director Kermoyan is right and all these projects are going to go through, then we have to have the resources to support those projects, because that's going to bring revenue back to our city. So that would be my areas to prioritize.
Okay, Ann, I forgot to ask you that priority. What would you be your priorities, your top 3? Ann, you're on mute. Is she there? Where did Ann go? Did we just lose Ann?
Sorry, I was
Oh,
trying
there you
to find my notes. Public safety is a priority. Oh, I'm not there?
You're there, I hear you.
Okay. Public,
You're not on video.
hang on.
Yeah, we don't have video, but we can hear you.
Public safety is a priority, essential services, and that would be public works type things. Street maintenance is important, building maintenance is important, and community programs such as the community center, open space, things that, living through this pandemic and being sheltered in place, there are a lot of, your eyes are opened up to things that you really took for granted, like being able to take a walk on the park course or using the track. And to me, those amenities are important for people's well-being and mental health. So that's important.
Okay, and Liz, what would you have as your top 3 priorities?
I would probably agree with what's been said before. I do think that in terms of the budget, I am not very reluctant to use reserves at this point, because I think that we just don't know. I think it comes back to what programs are self-support programs or essential services. And what we can do, whatever we can do with that caveat, and what Councilmember Bybee said earlier about what positions and what cuts I was supportive of.
So you put public safety, public and police security.
I would say my first priority is anything that benefits the community as a whole, which would be the community center and our parks. My second one, and I don't like ranking them. I think these are all equal. My second is protecting our assets, which is the roads and the buildings. And my third is obviously public safety. So I think they all come together for me under essential services.
Okay,
I don't think we can separate them out.
okay. So I think I heard from everybody on that. Okay, hang on here. I had some notes myself. I'm trying to find. Oh, there they are. Okay, so I would say under, I wouldn't necessarily be ranking 1, 2, and 3, but my priorities would be the public safety is, if that relates to police, but also essential services, and I would put some of the community center programs in that. I would put street maintenance and building maintenance in that, is that those are things that we should have, because in the long term, those can get worse very quickly. Open space to me is essential that we try maintain that. But in that regard, we don't need to be watering lawns at City Hall when we could be taking whatever, even if it's 50,000, to go out and maintain better the creek trail. So, and that goes to what Councilmember Bybee was saying about really looking at the efficiency of our services. You know, what is our water bill for the whole entire city? How much could we cut back our water? When we do that, how much do we cut back on maintenance of landscaping or anything? And that went back to the field rental cost recovery of the renting out the fields. There's a tremendous amount of labor and cost and upkeep for that type of thing. The one, I do agree with what Paul Rezikoff said about, okay, maybe we're subsidizing 50% of the street closure, but if it's only $1,000, the economic benefit that we're getting out of that $1,000 is we may end up with $5,000 more in tax revenue. So nothing came forward about what the costs are associated with these. I mean, everybody in the last couple of weeks is saying, close Campbell Avenue, close Campbell Avenue. I'm sure we're going to hear it on the next item, but what is the cost of closing Campbell Avenue? Does it offset the increase in income and sales tax that we're going to get out of that? Let's see here. Okay, so we are at 3:33. We didn't really delve into the CIP.
Or revenue.
Or revenue. So I guess what I wanted to say is we've made a commitment to the community to have item number 2 on the agenda. We have less than a half an hour left. How would people feel about having a meeting between now and the 25th? To have, because we're running out of time today, and we can't go past because of the planning commission meeting. Can we schedule, Brian? Can we schedule a meeting either for later in this week or early next week? Because we got to get this ready for the 25th.
We have a council meeting next Tuesday.
Okay.
A study session beforehand for VMT.
Can we postpone that
The study session?
for the VMT?
Todd, are you on the call? We can postpone it, just going to postpone the implementation of the VMT if you would choose to do it that way.
But we haven't finished with the budget discussion. So to me, which is more important?
I'm with you. Just want to make sure we're on the same page with that. Todd?
Todd, what happens if we delay it?
Well, we're already going to miss the deadline for compliance. But that's not catastrophic because we would just have to use maybe the guidance from the state in the interim. The thing that I'm not really concerned with missing the study session, I'd be more concerned with what it does. The implementation might be pushed out till September or October.
What is that, Todd?
This is the state mandated change that when we do environmental analysis of future development projects, we can no longer use the LOS methodology for traffic intersections as a way to
Look
make
at
a
Rich.
finding on environmental project. We have to go to vehicle miles traveled.
Way over Rich's head.
Well, that's I understand that it's very theoretical and all that, but it's going to be important as some of these, particularly the larger projects come through, and you talk about environmental impacts. You can't call, essentially, you won't be able to call impacts at an intersection an environmental impact any longer. And this is going to help us develop the policy for how do we really assess the transportation environmental impacts. It can wait. I just want to caution you that it'll just make our compliance come a little bit later.
And if I may, if we have projects in the works and it's problematic for them.
Okay, so we're not done. We're now already behind. Can we come earlier before the study session on Tuesday, or do we want another meeting, say on Friday, to finish the budget? Okay, let's do it by this way. All in favor of having us start early on Tuesday, keep the VMT and start earlier on the budget. Anybody in favor of that one? I don't see any hands. I see Liz. Paul, what about you?
Well, I'm looking at my calendar. Hold on. So tell me again what you want to do.
Okay, well, right now we have a study session on next Tuesday. I think it starts at 6:30 for the vehicle miles traveled, which we just heard could be important. We could theoretically start at 5 o'clock or 6 or whatever to give us extra time versus having a meeting, say on Friday or Monday.
I'd rather extend a little bit before that meeting than take up another afternoon or so. I can't, this is tough to do repeatedly. It's a half a day of work, so.
Okay, so Rich, how about you?
Well, I mean, I'd ask the group, because I don't have a big problem. Can this group as a whole, how long are we going to spend to finish off this meeting? It sounds
Well,
like
right now we still need to do item 2. And so I'm guessing we need at least another hour. So if we start the meeting next Tuesday an hour earlier, say at 5 o'clock.
I'm thinking out loud, we're talking a lot more than an hour to finish off everything people are talking about. And then staff to go back.
Let's start at 4 o'clock. Paul's comment was he would rather have it tag on to this other one than have a no separate day of it.
Okay.
Right, Paul?
Be a long day on Tuesdays.
No, but I understand that. To me, it's very difficult to lose 4 hours in blocks during the middle of the week for me. I'm already losing 6 to 9 or whatever. It's at least blocked that time.
Okay, so do you support meeting earlier?
Did we lose Councilmember Bybee?
What's on the agenda?
Brian, what's on the agenda Tuesday?
Can this just be folded into that agenda?
Fairly heavy agenda. We did have the municipal election, calling for the election. That shouldn't be a big deal item. The biggest item was probably the Campbell Avenue and Bascom Avenue request for authorization to amend the general plan. I imagine that will be a heavy discussion.
I thought that was out in July.
No, that's Campbell. The one that's in July is the Salmar.
Well, I asked you yesterday and you said that Campbell Bascom was in July.
No, the other way around. Campbell Bascom's next week. Salmar in July.
I think we're wasting some time here trying to figure this out. And so, I mean, it's obvious we need a follow-up meeting at some point, and either we do it early on Tuesday or have a special evening.
Okay.
So
So why don't,
that would be my recommendation.
so why don't we, Brian, send out something to us either with a tentative a date or starting Tuesday early or going later so that we can get to item 2 on the agenda.
Okay, we'll tag on to Tuesday's meeting. We'll send something out to you tomorrow.
Okay, and then, so now we're going to go to item 2. I don't have my agenda in front of me anymore to read it. Hang on here, let me get it. So So item 2 on unfinished business, this is to provide the city manager direction to create operational allowances for restaurant and retail business establishments necessary to expand their ability to operate outdoors during the COVID-19 pandemic, and involving temporary relaxation of development standards, permit process, and waiving application fees for outdoor dining and display permits and encroachment permits. So at this time right now, we are not discussing closing Campbell Avenue. That's not on the agenda item. This is to basically codify what we talked about last week that allowed the restaurants to open last Friday. So Paul, do you need a presentation or?
I'll give you a 15-second presentation.
I'm counting. 15 seconds, right?
15 seconds, ready? At your June 2nd meeting, you discussed different ways of helping the businesses. It was a great conversation. You gave direction. We implemented that direction. We're following up with resolutions. They're attached to your report. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, do we have any public people wanting to speak?
We do not.
We do not. Okay, so I'll bring it back to council. Does anybody want to make a comment, or do we want to go right into a motion? I see Liz's hand. I don't know if Ann, was that your hand up, or? Liz, go ahead. You're on mute.
I know. A second. So I was very pleased. Staff worked hard to get this all sorted. Thank you. I had 2 comments. I had a couple of comments in general, but over the weekend, several people contacted me. I had gone downtown, and also some of the downtown business had spoken. The problem is that people were selling alcohol, as they can now do, and then people were walking around downtown with open alcohol rather than staying in the business area that was established. And there was also a significant problem in at least 1, if not 2 or 3 businesses not complying with social distancing. So I have some wording I sent to staff. I'll read it here. I appreciate this is a little wordy, but I sent it to staff in case they had some suggestions. So I would just add item, I think it's condition 11 and 12 to the resolutions, both. Areas for restaurants and bars must still comply with ABC regulations for the sale of alcohol. Alcohol cannot be consumed on public streets and in public parks or private property. If designated eating areas are provided, subject to ABC approval, alcohol may be consumed. Merchants are responsible for consumption of alcohol beyond their approved areas. Sealed alcohol may be sold as takeout for home consumption per existing health department and ABC regulations during this emergency declaration. The city of Campbell recommends sealing the alcohol beverage containers, perhaps with a decorative sticker. All businesses are responsible to managing their exterior areas for social distancing. Customers must wear masks until eating, drinking. Seating parties of no more than 6 with a 6-foot separation. 2 warnings are permitted. The 3rd confirmed violation will result in temporary suspension of use of any existing or new outdoor area assigned to the business.
Okay. I would add to that it's not just social distancing while they're eating. It's what I saw on Saturday was crowds of people trying to wait in line to then go and order their food. I forget what the name, there was the taco place, and there was probably 15 people all packed just trying to go in. So it's not just maintaining the social distancing on your dining area, it's the people waiting for that dining area. Okay, and I have to say, Paul, thank you. I saw every parking space was filled on Saturday at lunch. Every business had people there. I saw a lot of lively conversations. I thought it was great. I think this really helped that we did this last week. Paperwork to follow. So keep it up. Any other comments?
Thanks goes to the council, though. We just implemented your wishes, so good job.
Good job to all of them. Kudos to everybody, okay? Paul,
And
do
then,
I see Rich?
I have a comment.
Yeah, just Director Kamorian, what is your thoughts on the extensions that the Vice Mayor wants to add here?
You know, it's an enforcement issue, and it kind of goes back to, you know, if we didn't pursue the relaxation of the dining, we would still be in the same position. So through a resolution, is it necessary? Maybe it's a legal question. Is it necessary to memorialize the public health officer's order when it's already an existing law? Is that a policing issue? You know, I just don't know if it's gonna do any more enforcement effect that already exists.
Thank you.
Anne?
Well, that problem, I wouldn't say it's a problem, but the alcohol consumption was happening prior to the rules being relaxed, because I have seen, you know, over the last few weeks, people taking alcohol from the restaurant, walking through downtown, walking down Railway with their drink. So isn't the onus on the restaurant, and shouldn't they be the ones that are controlling that? And doesn't the ABC then come down on the restaurant if someone abuses the takeout provision on the alcohol?
That's actually, yes, you're absolutely correct. So if you know, we could do, you know, we're in this helping business mode, so maybe we can take Vice Mayor Gibbons's comments, put them in a flyer and distribute them through the downtown, just as a reminder, hey, because the ABC is the ones that are out there enforcing the consumption. But again, they kind of created it because they do allow drinks to go now. So, yeah, it's compounded the issue.
One of the businesses actually said to me that what prompted a lot of this was the comment by one business, we're following all the rules and the person across the street is not, and we're being penalized, but we believe the rules should be followed. So they were asking for some help to get businesses to follow.
Paul?
Thank you. So I think Councilmember Bybee put it very well, but my fear is here that what we're doing in our resolution is easing Campbell restrictions to enable these businesses to do things they couldn't ordinarily do. But by adding in this wording, we're now being the arbiters or the monitors of county health policy and ABC policy, and that's not what we do. And if a business has a problem with another business that's violating county health rules, that's their right to call the county and complain about that. But we don't have the people that are going to arbitrate that, and we don't have the people that are going to count who's wearing a mask and who's not. I was downtown Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and last evening. It's great. It's wonderful to see. It's more crowded than I thought it would be. Most people that I saw were wearing masks. But probably not different than the people who refuse to wear them in the supermarket and get away with it. We can't stop that. We can just do what we can do ourselves. So I'm not in favor of putting threats on the businesses. Councilmember Bybee's right. If they're violating ABC policy, that's ABC's job to get them. And I think Director Kamorian's right. ABC, to some extent, caused the problem by relaxing restrictions, but they did it for a reason, and it's working. And you know, when we relax the parking restrictions to let people eat food in the lots, we create the parking problems. We know that. When they relaxed the alcohol sales problems, they were going to create people walking away with alcohol. They know that. I'm okay with that right now because we have a bigger issue here, which is bringing all these people back. So if businesses are complaining about other businesses, we have people online that are complaining about other neighbors, and let them make complaints. But I don't think we have code enforcement, and we certainly don't have police officers that should be spending time counting masks and who's standing where. I think most of the places are trying to do the right thing. They may not always know what the right thing is. And some of them are panicking. I'm opening. What do I do now? Can I bring them in? Can I put my clothes out? Can they try them on? It's going to work itself out. I'm happy with the way it was presented. And I understand community development only implemented it to say, but it was done quickly. People are making use of it. It's good. And I hope we have a problem where it gets too crowded and we have to look and see what's. It's great. I was amazed how people are just happy being out and lively. And even if you were sharing a table and I sat catty corner from someone, you know, on a floor table, it was so nice to be able to do that. I'd like to just continue with where we're at.
Okay, and I would say that Paul Camoyen's comments about maybe we just send a reminder letter. I know, Paul, we were on a call on Friday about the mayor's circle and the sending out the same information to all the cities, a reminder checklist. Do you have your little sign with the checkbox in the door? Do you have the list of what you need to have regarding social distancing and masks or whatever? So I would like to see it from that. It's a proactive, hey, you guys, FYI, just, you know, heads up, remember to do this. Because I do agree with, if we start adding this into this resolution, we're way beyond what we were trying to do, is relax our standards. We're trying to relax and say, you don't need this permit, you don't need to pay this fee. So I'm concerned about adding someone else's enforcement to this regulation. Okay, so do we have a motion then?
Yeah.
Who said yeah?
Oh, I said yeah, but I need to get, for some reason, somebody else will have to make the motion. My packet went to.
And do you have it handy, or Paul? Recommend.
I have it here.
I do. Oh, go ahead. I do, but go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'll make a motion authorizing the city manager authorizing city manager authority to establish operational allowances for restaurant and retail businesses in order to allow expansion to their ability to operate outdoors during the COVID-19 pandemic, involving temporary relaxation of development standards, permit processes, and waiving of application fees for outdoor dining / display permits and encroachment permits.
And the first part of that was to add the word adopt a resolution.
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Second.
All right, Paul Resnikoff seconded that. Let's have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Waterman,
Strong eye.
Councilmember Bybee,
Aye.
Councilmember Resnikoff,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Gibbons,
Aye.
Mayor Landry.
Aye. Thank you, guys. That's great. I
Good
was
job,
so
everyone.
good job. Thanks to staff. I forgot to say earlier, thank you for everybody who helped put this budget together. Tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of information. We may have had critical comments, but that's our job. But overall, I think staff did a great job. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. And I do appreciate everybody's time today. We are right now, 4 minutes short. So just to close out, Brian, you're going to send out information asking us about the meeting and how to, if we're going to meet before or during or a separate date, right? And then other than that, we're back together on Tuesday. And we're still going to keep the VMT study session before the meeting.
We're going to look at that schedule and determine the best way to proceed, either shorten that VMT study session, or we'll move the VMT perhaps. And we'll get back to you tomorrow on that.
Okay, and if it's a study session, we can't vote on anything.
That's correct. The VMT was supposed to be just a dialogue and information shared with you at this point.
When would we have to vote on it?
Our original schedule was that, our adjusted original schedule after pandemic and whatnot was to help hold the study session with you in June, come back with a draft policy in July, and adoption of a policy in August. So what I mentioned to Brian offline was that we'll look at whether we can shorten the study session, which is essentially just to help get council up to speed on what this is and why we're doing it, and then take any comments that you would have. So if it's possible to shorten that and keep it on the 16th, we will. But the other thing we're going to look at is to see if the consultant is available on the 25th, and we could do it either before or after our hopefully last budget meeting.
Of course,
So those
it'll
are
be our last budget.
So those are the two options we're looking at now, and we should be able to put a proposal together here with hopefully by tomorrow.
Okay, so you'll get back to us about the agenda and everything. Okay, any closing comments by anybody? Again, thank you all. I don't see anybody wanting to raise. Oh, Brian, you raising your hand? You're on mute.
Nope, I was just waving to everyone. Thank you all for your time today.
Okay. So we're all waving goodbye. Let's see which hand is in the screen there.
Good job, everyone.
Great, thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Bye.